Hello, and welcome back to Science for Sleep, the place where we explore the wondrous world together, and hopefully, you will have a truly peaceful sleep on this journey. Tonight, we will begin a story measured not just in years or in centuries, but in entire geological epochs. A story of patience, of endurance, and of a creature that seems to have found a way to whisper to time itself. Take a deep breath, and let us listen together to the symphony of existence, beginning with its very first notes. Let us begin together at the starting point of all stories, from the very essence of existence. Before there was life, even before there was our planet, there was only one singular truth that reigned over everything, an invisible yet omnipotent current, time. Try to imagine it, not as the ticking numbers on a clock, but as a vast, endless, and perfectly still ocean. The Big Bang was not a deafening explosion, but perhaps it was the first droplet of water falling upon the placid surface of the void, creating the first ripples of reality, ripples that began to propagate eternally in all directions. And we, along with everything we know, from the smallest dust particles to the grandest galaxies, are merely ripples drifting along on that journey. This ocean of time has no shore, no stopping point. It is indifferent to what it carries. It simply flows forward, a cold and emotionless current, obeying the most rigid and ruthless law in the entire universe, the law of entropy, also known as the second law of thermodynamics. This is perhaps the most fundamental and unbreakable law. It is a sentence passed upon all things, a promise of an end, whispered from the very first moment of the beginning. This law states something very simple, yet incredibly profound. Everything, without any exception, has a natural tendency to move from a state of order to a state of disorder, from complexity to simplicity, from a tightly organized structure back to its scattered components. Think of an intricately built sandcastle on a beach. Even if you don't touch it, even if no waves wash over it, over time, the wind, the rain, and gravity will slowly erode it, returning each grain of sand to the vast beach. That is entropy at work, and this law applies to everything, at every scale. Look up at the night sky. Each twinkling star is a gigantic nuclear furnace, a structure of incredible order, fighting a fierce battle against its own gravitational pull. But that battle cannot last forever. The star is burning its fuel, releasing energy and matter into space, and eventually, after millions or billions of years, it will be exhausted. It will collapse, becoming a cold white dwarf, a dense neutron star, or a black hole, and the elements it forged will be dispersed into the cosmos. That is entropy. Look at the most majestic mountain ranges on Earth. They seem eternal, but they are not. Wind, rain, and ice are relentlessly eroding them, bit by bit, carrying tiny rock particles down rivers and out to sea. In millions of years, even the highest peaks will be leveled. That is entropy. Even the galaxies, the grandest structures we know, are not immune. They are drifting apart from one another in an expanding universe. And one day, in the unimaginably distant future, all the stars will have died. The black holes will have evaporated, and the universe will become a cold, dark, and empty place, a final state of chaos and thermal equilibrium. That is the heat death of the universe. That is the ultimate victory of entropy. The flow of time, therefore, is not just a forward movement. It is a relentless current toward decay. And yet, amidst that chaotic and cold ocean, on a tiny speck of dust orbiting an ordinary star, something miraculous and nearly impossible happened. Something dared to rebel, dared to go against the great current of the universe. That something was life. Life, in its most primal essence, is an organized rebellion against entropy. It is an extraordinary effort, a chemical process of unimaginable sophistication, to create order from chaos, to gather simple atoms of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and build them into complex molecules, into shells, into living bodies. It is a tiny, warm, and ordered flame, lit in the midst of a cosmic blizzard, a flame always in danger of being extinguished by the cold winds of the second law. And to maintain that flame, to maintain its fragile order, life must pay a very high price. It cannot exist passively. It must constantly fight. It must seek out and consume energy from its environment, from sunlight, from chemicals, to maintain its structure and resist natural decay. This process, which we call metabolism, is the very heartbeat of the rebellion. But that heartbeat, ironically, is also the ticking of a biological clock, because the act of burning energy to maintain order also creates byproducts, waste, like free radicals, which damage the cellular machinery itself. The faster the heart beats, the brighter the flame burns, the quicker the machine wears out, and the sooner the flame dies. This harsh rule has shaped almost the entire story of evolution on our planet. In the brutal fight for survival, one strategy seems to have become dominant: speed. The predator must be faster than the prey. The prey must be faster than the predator. Evolution became a never-ending arms race, a race where slowness is synonymous with death. Listen closely to the pulse of the natural world. You will hear the frantic heart of a hummingbird, beating hundreds, even thousands of times per minute, a biological engine operating at its absolute limit just to keep its wings hovering in the air. But its life is as fleeting as a flash of light. You will hear the gasping breath of a cheetah after a chase at unimaginable speeds, every fiber of its muscle burning energy ferociously, pushing it closer to the limits of life. You will sense the short, hurried life of a mayfly, born from the water, molting, finding a mate, and dying, all within the span of a single day. Its entire purpose of existence is encapsulated in a frantic sprint against time. All these creatures, and millions of other species, are testaments to a seemingly singular and optimal survival strategy. Live fast, reproduce quickly, and die young, because in a world full of dangers, where death can come from a fang, a claw, a disease, or a sudden accident, there is no time for hesitation. Time is the enemy, and the only way to win is to outrun it, to pass on one's precious genetic material to the next generation before the current of entropy washes everything away. Life on Earth, therefore, seems to be obsessed with haste. It is a symphony of frantic rhythms, a dance of survival performed at a dizzying pace. Most organisms, from the smallest bacteria to the most complex mammals, are caught in this vortex, a vortex of energy consumption, of wear and tear, of inevitable aging. Their cells divide rapidly, and with each division, the telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of the chromosomes, shorten a little, like a slow-burning fuse. Copying errors in the DNA gradually accumulate, like tiny scratches on a perfect machine. Over time, these damages become too great. The biological machine, no matter how sophisticated, slowly breaks down under the weight of its own activity. That is the price of rebelling against entropy. A price that every living thing, without exception, must pay. That is the rule of the game, a rule that seems to have no exceptions whatsoever. The entire biosphere is a relentless race, a hurried battle to exist, to reproduce, before the most fundamental law of the universe reclaims what is rightfully its. But let us pause for a moment. Amidst the hurried symphony of life, amidst the frantic heartbeats and the hurried breaths, there seems to be a dissonant note, a long, sustained, and nearly eternal bass tone, a sound that does not belong to the race, a rhythm that does not follow the law of haste. It is the pulse of a different kind of existence, a completely different philosophy of life. It is the silence of the turtle. Imagine it, a creature that seems to have been sculpted from rock and time itself. It does not run. It does not hurry. It moves with a deliberate, calm grace, as if it has all the time in the world. And perhaps it truly does. While the world around it is a fast-forwarded film, the turtle is a still photograph, a frozen moment of existence. It is a silent, stone island in the midst of the furious river of time, watching the currents come and go, watching civilizations rise and fall. It is a creature that walked this earth when the first dinosaurs still reigned, and it continues to walk long after they have turned to dust. It is a living witness to geological history, a creature that carries not just a shell on its back, but the full weight of millions of years of evolution. That shell, with its ancient, etched patterns, looks like a map of bygone epochs. Every line tells a story of patience, of a survival strategy based not on speed, but on absolute endurance. The existence of the turtle poses a profound question, a question that challenges what we thought we knew about the laws of life and death. How? How can a creature step outside the frantic race of evolution? How can it slow down the flow of time within its own body to a degree that it nearly defies aging itself? What secret is hidden within that slow, yet extraordinary biological machine? Has it found another way to negotiate with the law of entropy, a pact that allows it to persist with placid indifference while everything around it decays? It is more than just an animal. It is a living philosopher, a lesson in permanence. It teaches us that there might be another path, a path that is not a sprint, but a long, long walk, a journey where patience is the ultimate strength. Its existence is a mystery, an invitation for us to slow down, to observe, and to listen to a story told not with words, but with the silence of hundreds of millions of years. And tonight, we will accept that invitation. We will embark on a journey together, not to distant stars, but on a voyage even more extraordinary, a deep dive into the ocean of time, traveling back against the current of hundreds of millions of years. Prepare your mind for a trip to our origins, to an era when the world was vastly different, an era of supercontinents and giant reptiles. Our time machine will not stop in the age of Tyrannosaurus rex, or even in the time of the gentle, long-necked dinosaurs. No, we must go further back, much, much further. We will set foot in the Triassic period, more than 220 million years ago, a hot and harsh world, to witness the very first chapters in the chronicle of the turtle being written. This is not merely a biological inquiry. This is an archaeological investigation, a genetic decoding, and a philosophical quest. Our mission is to find the answer to the most perplexing question. Where does the secret to longevity lie? In what language is it written? And where is it hidden within that ancient body? Does it reside in the structure of the shell, a living fortress forged through millions of years of evolution? Or does it hide within the cold blood, flowing with extraordinary slowness through its vessels? Or perhaps the answer lies somewhere even deeper, on a scale invisible to the naked eye, within the silent dance of molecules and genes, a code of endurance that has been copied and passed down through countless generations. This journey of ours is a promise that we will turn each page of this ancient book together, very slowly, very carefully, so as not to miss a single detail in this grand story of survival and permanence. We will begin by perceiving the world through our own senses. Imagine that we can place a hand on the rough, warm shell of a giant tortoise basking in the sunday, feel its solidity, a firmness that comes not just from its physical structure, but also from the calm that emanates from the creature itself. And if you listen closely, very, very closely, you might feel an extremely gentle, extremely slow vibration. That is not a sound from the surrounding environment. That is the beating of its heart. A heart that does not beat to the hurried rhythm of our mammalian world, but to a rhythm of its own, a geological rhythm, where each beat is separated by a long pause, as if it is measuring each moment of existence with great reverence. That is the first note in the symphony of slowness that we are about to explore. But the real journey only begins when we go deeper. Imagine we can shrink down, so small that we can travel inside its body, through blood vessels like gentle rivers, to reach the most fundamental unit of life, the cell. Inside this microscopic world, a universe of incredible order and efficiency is at work. We will witness the power plants, the mitochondria, operating at an exceptionally leisurely pace, like a fire that only smolders, releasing energy so sparingly and efficiently as to minimize the creation of toxic soot, the free radicals that can damage cellular structures. We will visit the central library, where the genome, the blueprint of life, is stored. There, we will see DNA repair mechanisms working tirelessly, like diligent librarians, scanning every letter in the enormous book, searching for and correcting the smallest copying errors with near-perfect accuracy. This is one of the first lines of defense against the ravages of time. And then, we will witness one of the greatest marvels of turtle biology, their cancer defense system. Imagine an elite cellular police force constantly patrolling the city. Any cell that shows signs of rebellion, any sign of abnormal growth, is immediately detected, surrounded, and given a final command: self-destruct. This process, called apoptosis, occurs so decisively and effectively in turtles that tumors are given almost no chance to form. It is a perfect internal defense mechanism, a lesson in how to maintain order and stability from within. Our journey will not stop at the cellular level. We will listen to the story told by evolution itself, a story of trade-offs, a story of how an ancient branch of reptiles decided to abandon the path of speed and agility in exchange for something far more precious: safety and time. We will see the shell not just as a shield, but as a declaration, a philosophical choice that has shaped the entire destiny of this lineage. We will together behold a masterpiece of endurance, a biological machine fine-tuned over millions of years, not just to exist, but to endure. And in order to fully comprehend this extraordinary story, to be able to traverse a journey of hundreds of millions of years, we need a map, not a map of geography, but of time itself, a route that will guide us through lost epochs and the deepest mysteries of biology. Our story, the chronicle of the turtle's permanence, will be divided into 8 chapters, 8 main parts. Each chapter is a door opening into another world, a crucial piece needed to form the complete picture of one of the most resilient creatures this planet has ever produced. The first chapter is the one we are experiencing together right now. This is the introduction, the overture, our effort to set a stage grand enough for such a magnificent story. We began by looking at the vastness of the universe and the depth of time, not to make the turtle's story seem small, but on the contrary, to highlight its miraculous and rare nature. We have placed its existence, a slow and steady burning flame, against the harsh law of entropy and the hurried race of most life on Earth. This is the context, the necessary backdrop for us to fully appreciate what is about to be revealed. In the second chapter, we will truly begin our journey back in time. We will call it The Stage, a World of Haste. Here, we will set foot on the Earth of the Triassic period, over 200 million years ago. We will feel the dry heat of the supercontinent Pangaea. We will witness a world dominated by swift and ferocious carnivorous reptiles. We will learn about the survival laws of that era, an era where speed was everything. At the same time, we will also explore the fundamental biological principles of aging, the internal enemies that all complex organisms must face. This is the harsh stage, the chaotic world from which a completely new survival strategy, a crazy and counterintuitive idea, was about to be born. Next, in the third chapter, the first spark, the forging of a living fortress, we will witness that miraculous moment. We will follow the evolutionary process that transformed an ordinary reptile into something entirely new. We will see the ribs begin to broaden and fuse, a slow process taking millions of years to create one of the most perfect defensive structures in natural history, the turtle shell. We will analyze the enormous trade-off behind this invention, the sacrifice of speed and flexibility in exchange for near absolute security. This is the story of the birth of a living fortress, an evolutionary decision that shaped the entire destiny of this lineage. Then, in the fourth chapter, the first revolution, withdrawing into the shell, the story of defense will be elevated to a new level. We will discover that the ability to retract the neck into the shell was not an original feature. It was a biological revolution, an even greater invention that perfected the turtle's defensive strategy. We will see how this revolution split the turtle world into two great lineages that exist to this day, and more importantly, how it reinforced the live slow philosophy, creating an environment of absolute safety within the body, allowing other biological processes to safely begin to slow down. In the fifth chapter, the Golden Age, the conquest of all environments, we will witness the fruits of these evolutionary inventions. After the reign of dinosaurs collapsed, turtles, with their unique survival strategy, not only survived, but thrived explosively. We will follow their journey as they diversified to fill every ecological niche, from the giant sea turtles that glided through ancient oceans, to the massive tortoises that began to graze on the continents, and countless other freshwater and marsh turtles. This was the Golden Age, a testament to the undeniable success of a seemingly clumsy design. The sixth chapter, The Kingdoms, an Era of Giants, will focus on one of the most majestic manifestations of turtle evolution. We will visit isolated islands like the Galapagos, where, free from predators, turtles evolved into true giants, creatures that could live for centuries. But this chapter is also a tragic story. We will witness the arrival of humans, the only predator the shell could not defend against, and the fall of the great tortoise kingdoms, a painful reminder of the fragility of even the most durable creatures. Coming to the seventh chapter, The Height of Complexity, decoding the anti-aging machine, our journey will change direction. From the outside world of fossils and evolutionary history, we will dive deep into the microscopic world inside the turtle's body. This is the core of our investigation. We will decode the golden triangle of longevity, a slow metabolism, extraordinary cellular resilience, and near-perfect cancer resistance. We will learn about the special genes, the DNA repair mechanisms, and the biochemical processes that have allowed turtles to achieve a state of negligible senescence. This is the chapter of science, of astonishing discoveries at the molecular level. And finally, in the eighth chapter, The Distant Future and the Legacy, a lesson from slowness, we will return to the macroscopic view. We will reflect on the future of turtles in a world rapidly changing at the hands of humanity. And more importantly, we will draw profound philosophical lessons from their story. What do turtles teach us about time, about patience, about the value of an unhurried life? Their legacy lies not just in their genome, but in the very lesson their existence offers to a fast-living, anxious mammalian species like ourselves. Those are the 8 chapters of our journey, a journey that will take us from the beginning of time to the deepest secrets of the cell, and finally, to reflections on the very meaning of existence. Now, the map is laid out. Let us step together into the second chapter and begin the real voyage into the past. Now, Let the time machine of our imagination carry us away. Feel a gentle vibration as the reality around you dissolves, the numbers on the clock spinning backward at an impossible speed. We glide past the world wars, past the Renaissance, past the fall of Rome. We fly back through the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, beyond even the dawn of civilization, when the Great Pyramids had not yet been conceived. We continue backward, past the last ice age, witnessing mammoths roaming the frozen steppes. We skim over the age of dinosaurs, seeing Tyrannosaurus rex let out a silent roar before fading into the past. But our destination is further still. The machine comes to a halt. The door opens, and a blast of hot, dry, oxygen-poor air floods in. Welcome to the Triassic period. Approximately 230 million years ago. This is our stage, a world that is almost unrecognizable. The sky is not a familiar blue, but a dusty orange-yellow hue, due to lower oxygen levels and a different atmospheric composition. The sun seems harsher, scorching a vast and desolate landscape. Look around you. There are no lush green meadows, because grass has not yet evolved. Instead, there are forests of giant ferns, towering horsetails, and primitive seed plants, creating a somewhat monotonous and stark scenery. There are no brightly colored flowers, no cheerful bird song, as both flowers and birds are inventions of the distant future. This world is quieter, but it is a silence filled with tension. Look down at the world map in your mind's eye. You will not see the 7 familiar continents. Instead, nearly all of Earth's landmass has merged into a single supercontinent, Pangaea. The existence of Pangaea created a climate of extremes. The coastal regions might be humid with seasonal monsoons, but the vast interior is a massive, arid, and scorching desert, where life struggles daily for survival. Great rivers meander through this land, but they often run dry, leaving cracked riverbeds under a merciless Sunday. This is a world of excess, of prolonged droughts and sudden, violent floods. And in this harsh world, one group of creatures rose to dominance, the reptiles. After the Permian-Triassic extinction, the most devastating event in the planet's history, which wiped out over 90% of marine life and 70% of terrestrial life, ecological niches were left wide open. Reptiles, with their water-retaining scaly skin and their ability to lay eggs on land, seized this opportunity perfectly. The Triassic was the dawn of the age of reptiles. But this was not the world of the giant, lumbering dinosaurs we often imagine. Life here moved at a breakneck pace. Observe the main players on this stage. The archosaurs, ancestors of both dinosaurs and crocodiles, were the rulers. Look over there. Apostasuchus, a 6-meter-long killing machine, moving swiftly on 4 powerful legs, with a jaw full of dagger-like teeth. It is an apex predator, and its strategy is speed and brute force. Or the Coelophysis, one of the very first dinosaurs, smaller, lighter, moving on 2 legs with incredible agility. They hunt in packs, a whirlwind of teeth and claws. Even the herbivores had to obey the law of speed. They had to be constantly on the move to find food, and fast enough to escape the ever-watchful predators. In this world, slowness was a death sentence. Every creature was locked in a biological arms race. Predators evolved to run faster, and prey had to evolve to respond in kind. The advantage belonged to those with longer legs, more efficient muscles, and a nervous system capable of split-second reactions. Metabolism had to be fast to fuel the chases and escapes. Hearts had to beat quickly. Breaths had to be rapid. This was a world built on the philosophy of live fast or die. Everything was optimized for movement, for immediate action and reaction. Defense, if it existed, had to be active, horns for attacking, spiky armor for fighting back, or simply the ability to camouflage and hide in an instant. There was no room for passive defense, no room for standing still and waiting. Any creature that chose such a strategy would be quickly torn apart by a dozen ever-hungry predators. The evolutionary pressure here pushed in only one direction: faster, stronger, more aggressive. It was upon this brutal and hurried stage, amidst these life-or-death chases, that a completely different evolutionary idea, a true rebellion against the rule of the age, began to quietly germinate. An idea based not on running faster, but on making the chase itself pointless. An idea of abandoning the race entirely and building a fortress instead. And to understand the audacity of this new evolutionary idea, the idea of building a fortress, we must first understand the enemy it sought to counter. This enemy was not a hungry Postosuchus or a swift pack of Coelophysis. This enemy was far more formidable because it did not come from the outside. It came from within. It is the fundamental biological laws of aging, the basic ingredients that have defined the finite lifespan of nearly every complex organism. This is a war fought on a microscopic scale, a silent battle within every single cell of the body. Let us dive together into this internal world. The foundation of all life, as we know it, is metabolism. It is the process of turning food and air into energy, energy to move, to grow, and most importantly, to maintain that fragile order against entropy. Imagine metabolism as a furnace inside every creature. In the harsh world of the Triassic period, in order to run, fight, and survive, the reptiles had to keep their furnaces burning brightly, intensely. A fast metabolism generates an abundant and immediate supply of energy. But just like any furnace, burning fuel always produces smoke and ash. In the biological world, this toxic soot is known as free radicals. These are unstable molecules, missing an electron, and they frantically roam the cell to steal an electron from other molecules, such as DNA, proteins, or cell membranes. This process, called oxidative stress, is like rusting from the inside. It causes cumulative damage, slowly but surely wearing down the cellular machinery. The faster the metabolism, the more intensely the furnace burns, the more free radicals are produced. This is the first fundamental trade-off. Energy and speed come at the cost of faster internal wear and tear. Next, let us go to the central library of the cell, where the DNA, the instruction manual for life, is housed. Every time a cell divides to create new cells, this entire enormous book must be copied accurately. But no copying process is perfect. Sometimes, small errors, typos, will occur. The body has ingenious repair mechanisms, but a few errors can still slip through. Over time, these genetic errors accumulate, potentially causing cells to function less efficiently or even leading to diseases. But there is an even bigger problem associated with DNA replication. Imagine each DNA strand is like a shoelace. At the two ends of the shoelace, there are small plastic tips that keep it from fraying. In the world of genetics, these plastic tips are called telomeres. They are repeating segments of DNA that do not contain important genetic information. Their role is to protect the precious genes within. The problem is, every time the DNA is copied, the replication machinery cannot go all the way to the very end of the strand. A small piece of the telomere is lost. With every cell division, the telomeres get a little shorter. It's like a slow-burning fuse, a built-in countdown clock in every cell. When the telomeres become too short, the cell can no longer divide safely. It enters a state called cellular senescence, stops dividing, and eventually dies. This is one of the most fundamental mechanisms that causes aging at the tissue and organ level. The body's decay is not just due to activity, but is also pre-programmed into our very genome. Finally, let us talk about one of the most feared consequences of accumulated damage and copying errors: cancer. Cancer, in essence, is a rebellion of the body's own cells. A certain cell, having accumulated enough erroneous genetic mutations, ignores control signals and begins to divide in an unorganized and uncontrollable manner. It forgets its role in the cellular community and acts only for its own benefit. The longer an organism lives, the more times its cells have to divide, and the higher the probability that such a critical error will occur. It's a cruel paradox. The very process necessary to sustain life cell division contains the seeds of destruction. These three factors, oxidative stress from metabolism, the shortening of telomeres and accumulation of genetic errors, and the risk of cancer, are the basic ingredients of aging. They form a biological iron cage, imprisoning most organisms within a certain lifespan limit. In the Triassic period, with evolutionary pressure leaning heavily towards speed and fast metabolism, this cage became even tighter. Life could be fierce and magnificent, but it was also short. Any new evolutionary strategy that wished to break this limit, to achieve a superior lifespan, would not only have to deal with external predators, but also find a way to neutralize these internal enemies. It would have to find a way to keep its furnace burning more cleanly and efficiently. It would have to find a way to protect its shoelace tips, its telomeres. And it would have to build an internal defense system strong enough to quell cellular rebellions before they could even begin. It was a nearly insurmountable biological challenge. But in some quiet corner of this hurried world, nature had begun a bold experiment, an experiment in slowness. So, the internal enemy has been identified, a grim trinity of metabolism, genetic decay, and the risk of cellular rebellion. And the stage has been set, a hot, brutal Triassic world that worships speed. Against this backdrop, an experiment in slowness began. But where did this experiment originate? To find the cradle that nurtured this radical idea, we must take another step back to look at the larger picture of reptile evolution itself. Let us return to a time even before the Triassic, to the Carboniferous period, over 300 million years ago. The world then was a vast, humid swamp, where large amphibians dominated the land. But they, like their descendants, the frogs and salamanders of today, were still bound by an invisible chain to the place where they were born, the water. Their skin had to remain moist to breathe. And more importantly, their eggs, lacking a protective hard shell, had to be laid in water to keep from drying out. This dependency limited their conquest of the land. And then, from some branch of amphibians, a great biological invention emerged, an invention that would change the face of the planet forever. It was the amniotic egg. This was not simply an egg with a shell. It was a complete life support system, a miniature private pond that allowed an embryo to develop safely on dry land. Inside the protective leathery or hard shell, there were special membranes that provided nutrients, managed waste, and most importantly, created a private aquatic world for the embryo. With this invention, the first reptiles severed their final chain to the water. They were liberated. They could venture deep into the arid interiors that their amphibian ancestors could never have dreamed of. Paired with their water-retaining scaly skin, the amniotic egg made reptiles the first true conquerors of the land. This liberation led to an evolutionary explosion. From these early forms, the reptilian family tree began to branch rapidly, producing a myriad of different shapes and sizes. Paleontologists, in their efforts to understand the relationships between these branches, discovered a crucial feature, a key for classification in an unexpected place: the structure of the skull, specifically the presence and number of openings in the temporal region behind the eye sockets. These openings, called temporal fenestrae, were not useless holes. They allowed for larger, more powerful jaw muscles to attach, while also making the skull lighter without compromising its strength. Based on this feature, the ancient reptiles were divided into three main groups: three great evolutionary cradles. The first cradle was the synapsida, or mammal, like reptiles. Their skulls had a single opening on each side. This branch, in a great twist of evolutionary history, did not ultimately lead to the reptiles we know today. Instead, they were the direct ancestors of a completely new class of animals, a class of warm-blooded, furry creatures that nursed their young with milk. They were our ancestors, the mammals. Our story does not lie here. The second cradle was the anapsida, meaning no arch. Their skulls were solid, without any temporal openings. This was a primitive, simple, and extremely robust design. For a very long time, scientists believed this was the cradle of the turtles. It seemed to make perfect sense. A solid, heavy, and fortified skull seemed to fit perfectly with the turtles' defensive and slow-paced philosophy. They were seen as true, living fossils, the last survivors of an ancient and primitive reptilian branch, ones that had changed little over hundreds of millions of years. And the third cradle, the most successful and diverse, was the diapsida, meaning two arches. Their skulls had two openings on each side. This design allowed for superior flexibility and jaw strength, and it became the formula for success. From this diapsid cradle exploded nearly all of the reptiles that would dominate the world. The swift lizards, the stealthy snakes, the powerful crocodiles, and of course, the entire great dynasty of the dinosaurs, along with their descendants, the birds. This was the branch of dynamism, of speed, of flexible adaptation. So, where did the turtles belong among these three cradles? For over a century, the answer seemed clear. With their solid, openingless skulls, they were placed squarely in the anapsida group. The story told was one of evolutionary conservatism. While other reptiles were experimenting with more complex skull designs to become faster and stronger, turtles remained faithful to the primitive design of their ancestors, and it was this simplicity and solidity that helped them survive. But then, in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, a revolution happened, not in the fossil quarries, but in the genetics labs, as scientists became able to decode and compare the genomes of animals. A startling truth was revealed, a truth that completely rewrote the turtle family tree. DNA analysis showed, irrefutably, that turtles are not the last survivors of the primitive anapsid branch. Their closest genetic relationships lie deep within the diapsid branch. They are more closely related to birds and crocodiles than to any other ancient reptile lineage. Their solid skull is not a primitive feature that was retained. It is a derived evolutionary trait. This means that the distant ancestors of turtles were, in fact, diapsid reptiles, with skulls that had two openings, just like lizards or dinosaurs. But somewhere along their evolutionary path, for some reason, they took a completely different road. Instead of continuing to develop towards agility, they began to specialize for defense. And in that process, they evolved to close up the openings in their skulls, creating a secondary structure that looks like an anapsid skull, but has a completely different origin. This was one of the most stunning discoveries in modern paleontology, and it changes our entire story. Turtles are not conservatives clinging to the past. They are revolutionaries. They did not come from a slow and stagnant evolutionary cradle. They came from the most dynamic, successful, and aggressive cradle of them all, the one that gave birth to the rulers of the earth. But instead of following the path laid out by their cousins, they made a sharp turn. They actively abandoned their legacy of speed and began an unprecedented biological experiment. They evolved their skulls backward in complexity, in exchange for absolute solidity. The cradle of the turtle, therefore, was not a quiet pond on the sidelines of the main evolutionary current. It was right in the heart of the storm, amongst the reptiles fiercely competing to be faster and stronger. And it was from the middle of that turbulent cradle that a decision was made, a decision that would lead to the birth of a living fortress. And so, the path was chosen. not by a single individual in a moment of decision, but by the relentless pressure of natural selection over thousands of generations, a quiet but definitive branching off from the evolutionary highway of the reptiles. The ancestors of turtles, creatures from the dynamic diapsid branch, stood at a fork in the road. One path promised greater speed, more powerful jaws, and dominance through aggression. The other path promised nothing. It was an untrodden trail leading into a land of slowness, a survival philosophy completely alien to the Triassic world. And somehow, they chose the second path. Now, we will zoom in on that very moment of transition, the moment when the idea of a fortress began to take shape, not in a mind, but in the very bones and flesh of a lineage. This is the story of the transition from without to with, from a typical reptilian body, with no special protection, to a body bearing the very first bricks of a great defensive structure. To find this moment, we must travel to a specific place on the supercontinent of Pangaea, a region we now call South Africa. There, in the sedimentary rocks of the Karoo Basin, paleontologists have found a creature that looks like a puzzle. It is not quite a lizard, but it is not yet a turtle. It is something in between, a draft of nature, a perfect transitional fossil. Its name is Eunotosaurus africanus. Let us reconstruct this creature together. Imagine a small reptile, perhaps about 30 centimeters long, with a small head and a body that appears somewhat broad and rigid. At first glance, it might not look very impressive amidst the giant predators of its time, but if we look closer at its skeleton, we will see a revolutionary difference, a change that foreshadowed an entire dynasty to come. That difference lies in its ribs. In a typical reptile, like a lizard, the ribs are slender, curved, and flexible structures. They form a rib cage that can expand and contract, a crucial element for breathing and for allowing the body to bend from side to side when running, a motion that lengthens the stride and increases speed. But in Eunotosaurus, the ribs were completely different. They were no longer slender. They had become extremely broad, flat, and T-shaped in cross-section. 8 or 9 pairs of ribs in the middle of the trunk had undergone an incredible transformation. They fanned out and nearly touched each other, creating a structure resembling a partial back shield, a primordial version of a turtle's carapace. This is it. This is the first spark. The moment of without became with. Without a specialized armor became with strangely modified ribs. This was not a minor change. This was a complete redesign of the body's torso, and it came at an extremely high price. With such broad and nearly fused ribs, the rib cage of Eunotosaurus became rigid. It lost the ability to flexibly undulate its body, like its reptilian cousins. What does this mean? It means it gave up speed. It could no longer run fast. In a world where speed was everything, this seemed like evolutionary suicide. Why? Why would a creature evolve in a direction that made it slower and more vulnerable to predators? For many years, this was a mystery. But a growing hypothesis has offered a compelling explanation, one that paints a completely new picture of the origin of the shell. Perhaps the original purpose of these broad ribs was not for defense against an attack from above. Perhaps their original purpose was for digging. Let us return to the harsh world of the Triassic. The interior of Pangaea was a hot and arid place. To survive, many small animals had to find ways to escape the scorching heat of the day and the cold of the night. And the best way to do that was to dig burrows. The hypothesis suggests that Eunotosaurus was a master burrower. Imagine the scene. This small animal using its powerful forelimbs to claw at the earth, digging deep into the ground to create a safe haven. And in this digging process, its broad and rigid ribs played a crucial role. They did not just protect the internal organs from being crushed by soil and rock. They turned the animal's entire trunk into a solid anchor. While the forelimbs were working powerfully, this rigid trunk kept the body stable, providing a firm base to generate leverage. The shell, therefore, may not have started as a shield. It may have started as a shovel, a specialized tool for labor. Defense was just a secondary benefit, a fortunate side effect. The primary purpose was to build a home, a fortress underground. This was a decisive moment of transition. By specializing for a burrowing lifestyle, the lineage of Unitosaurus bet everything on a new way of life. They stepped onto an evolutionary path of no return. Once the ribs began to broaden and fuse, the road to becoming a sprinter was closed forever. They were committed to a slower life, a life tied to the earth, a life based on building shelter rather than running away. It was a bold gamble. While others were sharpening their weapons and increasing their speed, they were quietly perfecting their construction tools. They chose a different philosophy to face a brutal world. When you cannot outrun your enemies, dig a hole so deep they cannot find you. And it was from that initial decision, from the modification of the ribs for the purpose of digging, that a much grander structure began to take shape. Those broad ribs, over the next millions of years, would continue to fuse, incorporating the spine and new bony plates from the skin, to finally create one of the most miraculous and durable biological structures in architecture, the complete turtle shell. The moment of Unitosaurus was the very first foundation stone being laid for that edifice. The gamble of Unitosaurus had paid off. The burrowing strategy, reinforced by a rigid body frame, proved to be a successful path in the harsh world of the Triassic. It allowed a small lineage of reptiles to find a safe ecological niche, a refuge from both the scorching heat and the hurried predators on the surface. But evolution, by its very nature, never stands still. Once a new trait appears and proves its worth, nature begins to tinker with it, testing it in new contexts, refining and repurposing it for unexpected ends. The broad ribs of Unitosaurus were just such a playground. The foundation was laid, but the building would be constructed according to a blueprint that even the original architects could not have envisioned. Our next journey takes us to another place, another time, to the marine sedimentary rocks of southwestern China. Here, in 2008, paleontologists announced a world-shaking discovery, a fossil that filled a critical gap in our story. This creature was given a name that says it all, Odontocheles semitestacea, meaning the toothed turtle with a half shell. This was no longer a hypothesis or a speculation. This was irrefutable fossil evidence of a turtle in the making. Let us reconstruct Odontocheles together. It was a creature about 40 centimeters long, and unlike Unitosaurus, it had many features suggesting an aquatic or semi-aquatic lifestyle. It had a long, slender snout, and most importantly, when we look at its armor, we see something strange. Its belly was completely encased in a solid and complete bony structure. This was the turtle's plastron, fully formed. But when we look at its back, the story is completely different. Its back did not have the curved, sturdy carapace of a modern turtle. Instead, we only see broad ribs, very similar to those of Unitosaurus, but not yet fused together, and not yet covered by bony plates or scutes. It was truly a turtle with only half a shell. And as its name suggests, when scientists looked at its jaws, they found another primitive feature. It still had a full set of teeth in both its upper and lower jaws. It did not yet have the characteristic horny beak of turtles today. Odontocheles is a perfect mosaic of old and new features. It is a missing link found, a clear echo from the evolutionary past. But why? Why did it evolve this way? Why a complete plastron, while the back was still a work in progress? The answer most likely lies in its habitat. Imagine odontochelys swimming in the shallow coastal waters of the Triassic. In this environment, the greatest threat came not from the air or the land, but from below. Predatory marine reptiles, like the nothosaurs, could strike from the depths, targeting the soft, unprotected underbelly. In this context, evolving a solid belly plate first was an extremely logical defensive strategy. The plastron provided essential protection against surprise attacks from beneath. Meanwhile, the back, being less threatened, could still retain some flexibility from the not yet fully fused ribs. As we can see, the evolutionary path of the shell was not a synchronous event. It was built piece by piece, according to the specific demands of the environment. The original design of broad ribs, meant for digging, was now repurposed and refined for a life in water, with the top priority being the protection of the belly. But the story of its formation is not yet over. Odontochelys was a crucial intermediate step, but it was not yet a complete fortress. To see the first nearly finished version, we must travel to another place, to the quarries of Germany and Thailand. There, we meet an even more ancient creature, though discovered earlier, Proganochelys quensteti. Its name means before turtle, and it is truly one of the first creatures we can confidently call a true turtle. Proganochelys was a quantum leap from its predecessors. It was larger, about a meter long, and had an incredibly robust appearance. And most importantly, its fortress was complete. Both the plastron on its belly and the carapace on its back were fully formed. The broad ribs had now completely fused with the spine and were covered by a layer of large bony scutes, forming an impenetrable solid dome. The classic structure, the unmistakable silhouette of the turtle, was born. This was an architectural achievement of nature, a design that would prove its success for the next 200 million years. But even though its shell looked very modern, Proganochelys still carried traces of its primitive past. When we look at its skeleton, we see that it could not yet fully retract its head and limbs into its shell like turtles today. The structure of its spine and joints did not yet allow for it. To compensate for this shortcoming, it evolved other defense mechanisms. Its neck and tail were covered in small, bony spikes, like an extra defensive fence, and its tail ended in a bony club, a weapon we would later see in the ankylosaur dinosaurs. It was a fortress that came with its own weaponry, and like Odontochelys, it still retained small teeth, not in its jaws, but on the roof of its mouth. The horny beak was not yet complete. From Eunotosaurus with its broad ribs, to Odontochelys with its plastron, and finally to Proganochelys with its complete fortress, we have an astonishingly beautiful fossil sequence. It shows us that a structure as complex and iconic as the turtle shell did not appear suddenly. It was the result of a slow, step-by-step evolutionary process over tens of millions of years. Each stage was a solution to a specific problem, an adaptation to a particular environment. Eunotosaurus needed an anchor for digging. Odontochelys needed a belly shield for swimming. And Proganochelys combined all those lessons to create the perfect mobile home for a life on land. The first drafts were complete. A new body form, a new philosophy of life, was now etched in stone, ready to face the test of time. With Proganochelys, the classic silhouette of the turtle had arrived. But this familiar appearance conceals a bodily redesign so extreme and profound that almost no other vertebrate has ever undergone anything like it. To truly understand the core operating principle of the shell, we cannot just see it as a suit of armor worn on the outside. We must understand that it is not an accessory. It is the skeleton. It is the body itself. Let us perform an imaginary dissection together. Let us look past the outer layer of horny scutes and examine the bony structure of the carapace within. You would see a dome constructed from about 50 to 60 bones, perfectly fitted together. But these are not new bones that evolved to create the shell. They are old parts that have been ingeniously repurposed. The central part of the dome, running along the spine, is none other than the animal's thoracic vertebrae, which have been broadened and fused. And fanning out from there, covering most of the area, are the very same broad ribs we saw in Unitosaurus, now completely locked together and to the spine, leaving no gaps. Encircling the rim of the dome is a ring of dermal bones, bones formed from the skin, which help to solidify the entire structure. This is a complete fusion. The spine and the rib cage have become one with the armor. This leads to a bizarre fact, unique in the animal kingdom. The turtle's shoulder blades and pelvis are not located outside the rib cage, as they are in all other four-limbed animals, including ourselves. Instead, during embryonic development, they migrate to a completely new position, inside the rib cage. The turtle is the only creature that carries its limb girdles inside its own rib cage. This is a bodily rearrangement at the most fundamental level, and it is this rearrangement that came with an enormous sacrifice, a trade-off that has shaped the entire physiology of the turtle. Think about how you breathe. You inhale, your diaphragm contracts, and your chest expands, creating a vacuum that pulls air into your lungs. You exhale, your chest collapses, pushing the air out. This process, called negative pressure breathing, is entirely dependent on the flexibility of the rib cage. But the turtle, with a rib cage fused into a solid, rigid box of bone, has completely given up this ability. The shell, its protective fortress, is also a bony corset that prevents it from breathing in the manner of its ancestors. So how did it solve this seemingly impossible problem? It invented a completely new, unique respiratory system. Instead of using its rib cage, the turtle uses its internal organs as a piston. Imagine the inside of the shell as a sealed chamber. There, the lungs are attached to the inner surface of the top of the carapace. Below the lungs are the other viscera, like the liver and stomach. To inhale, the turtle uses special muscles on its flanks to pull the organs down and back. This action increases the volume of the body cavity, creating negative pressure and drawing air into the lungs, much like how you pull back on a bicycle pump. To exhale, it uses a different set of muscles to compress the organs, pushing them forward and up against the lungs, forcing the air out. It is an incredibly complex and energy-intensive breathing mechanism, an ingenious solution to a problem of its own evolutionary making. The core operating principle of the turtle, therefore, is one of comprehensive trade-offs. It sacrificed bodily flexibility for armor, it sacrificed speed for defense, and it sacrificed a simple, efficient respiratory system for an impenetrable bony structure. Every aspect of its biology is dictated by the existence of the shell. It cannot run fast, not just because of the shell's weight, but because its rigid thorax does not allow its body to bend. It cannot breathe easily, and many aquatic turtles have even had to evolve supplementary methods of respiration, like absorbing oxygen through the skin in their throat or through capillaries in their cloaca to stay underwater longer. Its entire life is a series of complex solutions to problems caused by its own initial evolutionary choice. But the end result of all these sacrifices is a nearly perfect defensive strategy. In a world full of sharp teeth and claws, the turtle created something that most predators simply cannot solve. The shell is not just hard. Its domed structure is also incredibly effective at distributing impact forces, just like the architecture of a bridge or an ancient cathedral. Biting through a turtle's shell requires a jaw force that very few creatures possess. By sacrificing everything else, the turtle achieved a single goal: invulnerability. It turned its body into a shelter, a mobile home, and it was within the safety of this home that a second, quieter evolution at the physiological and cellular level could begin to take place. The absolute security provided by the shell removed the pressure to live fast. It did not need to run. It did not need to fight. It only needed to wait. And it was this waiting, this protected slowness, that opened the door to a long life, a life no longer haunted by haste. The turtle's operating principle is a profound lesson in specialization. Choose one thing and do it exceptionally well, no matter how great the cost. The turtle chose defense, and it became the master of the art. And so, the machine was built, a living fortress, a marvel of bioengineering constructed from bone, skin, and sacrifice. With Progonochales, the basic design was complete, and it was unleashed upon the world to face the ultimate test, the crucible of time. The stability and self-sustaining nature of this design is not just a story of material hardness, it is a story of ecological success, of how a passive defensive strategy could triumph in a world that worshipped aggression. Let us look together at the bigger picture. At the end of the Triassic period, around 200 million years ago, our planet faced yet another crisis. A mass extinction event, likely caused by colossal volcanic activity, wiped out many of the dominant reptiles on land and in the sea. It was a great purge, a resetting of the chessboard of life, and in that chaos, who survived? It was not always the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes, it was the best prepared. The first turtles, with their mobile fortresses, made it through this catastrophe. They couldn't run fast, but they could retreat and wait until the worst had passed. Their ability to find shelter, whether underground or within their own shells, gave them a decisive advantage. And when the dust settled, a new world opened up. The Jurassic period arrived, and with it, the rise of the true kings of the age of reptiles, the dinosaurs. The world was now dominated by giants, from terrifying predatory allosaurs to towering plant-eating brachiosaurs. In such a world of extremes, a small, slow creature like a turtle seemingly stood no chance. But they didn't just survive, they thrived. Imagine a Jurassic turtle, nibbling on low-lying ferns, as the shadow of a giant dinosaur passes over. The predator might see it, but what could it do? Bending down to try and bite a moving rock hardly seemed like an efficient use of energy. The shell turned the turtle into a meal that required too much effort. It wasn't worth the trouble by becoming difficult to eat. Turtles removed themselves from a large part of the food chain. They created their own ecological niche, the niche of not being worth hunting. This success wasn't limited to the land. Many turtle lineages returned to the water, the habitat of their distant ancestors. In the oceans and rivers of the Mesozoic world, they lived alongside giant marine reptiles like plesiosaurs and mosasaurs. And once again, the shell proved its worth, an effective shield against even the most powerful jaws. The stability of this design also lay in its versatility. Though their bodies were rigid, their life strategies were diverse. Turtles became expert generalists. Some ate plants, some ate fish, some ate insects, and some ate whatever they could find. This non-specialized diet helped them adapt to many different environments and survive through periods of food scarcity. And then, around 66 million years ago, the greatest catastrophe struck. A giant asteroid slammed into the Earth, triggering a prolonged impact winter that wiped out the entire non-avian dinosaur dynasty and about 75% of all life on the planet. The world plunged into darkness and cold. Plants died, and food chains collapsed. Large, active creatures with high metabolic needs were the first to perish. They couldn't find enough food to maintain their internal furnaces. But the turtles, once again, the philosophy of living slow became the key. With their extremely slow metabolisms, they could survive for long periods without food. They could hibernate, hiding in mud or burrows, waiting for months even years, until better conditions returned. While the dinosaurs starved, the turtles simply waited. The self-sustaining nature of the turtle lineage is a powerful testament to the strength of passive defense and a slow metabolism. They taught the world a lesson that survival does not always belong to the most aggressive. Sometimes, it belongs to the most patient. The shell was not just a suit of armor. It was a biological insurance policy. It allowed turtles to play a safe bet in the high-stakes game of evolution. They might not win glorious victories or become apex predators, but they also avoided catastrophic failures. They simply endured. And in the long run of geological time, persistent endurance is the ultimate form of victory. The fortress had been built, and it had proven itself to be indestructible against the greatest catastrophes the planet had ever known. It had withstood mass extinctions, giant predators, and the changing of epochs. With this secure foundation now established, evolution could begin a more subtle work, a work focused not on the external world, but on the world within, a work of fine-tuning the biological machine so that it could not only exist, but could extend that existence to unimaginable limits. The fortress had stood firm. Through the firestorms of mass extinctions, through the rise and fall of monstrous dynasties, the design of Progonochilus had proven its worth. The shell, a masterpiece of fused bone and skin, had become a symbol of invulnerability, a defiant statement against a world that ran on violence and destruction. But any fortress, no matter how strong, has a weak point, and the weakness of the early turtle fortress was its unclosable gates. The head, with its vital brain and senses, and the four limbs, the means of locomotion and interaction with the world, remained exposed. Progonochilus attempted to compensate for this with spikes on its neck and a club on its tail, which were active defense efforts. But this was a philosophical contradiction. Its entire body was built for passive defense, for waiting, yet its most vulnerable parts required an active response. A perfect shield is meaningless if the warrior holding it can be easily struck in the face. And the world after the end Triassic extinction did not become any gentler. On the contrary, it became more sophisticatedly dangerous. The Jurassic and Cretaceous periods witnessed an explosion of theropod dinosaurs, predators that had evolved to a whole new level. They were not just bigger and stronger, they were smarter, with keener senses and more complex hunting strategies. An Allosaurus, or later a Tyrannosaurus, would not waste time trying to crush a hard shell. They would immediately recognize the fatal flaw, the long neck and the unprotected head. A single, precise, and swift bite would solve the problem. The pressure of natural selection once again bore down on the turtle lineage. The shell had solved the problem of being crushed, but it had not solved the problem of being picked apart from the outside. A new solution was needed, a second revolution, an invention even more ingenious than the shell itself. The evolutionary question posed now was incredibly technically challenging: how to protect the head. The seemingly obvious answer was to pull it in. But pull it in where? The ribcage had become a solid box of bone, and worse, as we know, the shoulder girdle had moved inside the ribcage. This created a nearly insurmountable mechanical barrier. How do you pull a neck and head through a bony shoulder loop that sits right in front of the entrance? This was an extremely complex biomechanical puzzle. It required a complete re-engineering of the structure of the cervical or neck vertebrae. It wasn't just about bending. It required a system of specialized joints that would allow the neck spine to fold, twist, and collapse into an extremely confined space. And in one of the most beautiful examples of convergent evolution, nature found not just one, but two completely different solutions to the same problem, two different answers to the same question. And it was these two solutions that created a great schism, a division in the turtle world that persists to this day, splitting them into two major suborders, the Pleurodira and the Cryptodira. Let us explore the first solution together, that of the Pleurodira, also known as the side-necked turtles. Imagine a Swiss Army knife. To retract the blade, you don't push it straight into the handle. You fold it on a hinge. That is the philosophy of the side-necked turtles. Instead of trying to pull the neck straight in, a mechanically near impossible feat, they evolved a different method. They fold their neck sideways. When threatened, a side-necked turtle bends its long neck to the side, tucking its head and part of the neck into the space in front of its leg, fitting snugly between the upper and lower parts of the shell. Their cervical spine evolved specialized vertebrae that allow for extreme lateral flexion without damaging the spinal cord. It is an elegant solution, like a complex yoga pose. However, this solution is not perfect. Although the head is hidden, one side of the neck remains exposed. It is not a complete seal. Today, we find these side-necked turtles primarily in freshwater environments in the southern hemisphere, in Australia, South America, and Africa. They are the inheritors of one of the first two great ideas for absolute security. And then, there is the second solution, that of the Cryptodira, or hidden-necked turtles. This is the solution most of us are familiar with, seen in tortoises, box turtles, and sea turtles. And this is perhaps an even more impressive feat of bioengineering. Instead of folding sideways, the hidden-necked turtles accomplished the seemingly impossible. They pull their head and neck straight back into the body. To do this, they turned their cervical spine into a collapsible telescope. Their neck vertebrae don't just bend. They have specialized joints that allow them to pivot and slide over each other in a precise sequence, forming a vertical-shaped curve. When the turtle retracts its neck, powerful muscles pull this entire cervical column inward through the shoulder girdle, and the head comes to rest deep within the fortress. The entire process is completely hidden from view, like a magician making an object disappear. And the advantage of this solution is that it creates a near-perfect protection. Once the head is withdrawn, the powerful forelimbs, covered in hard scales, can be pulled back to block almost the entire entrance, creating an armored door. The fortress was now sealed. This revolution, whether side-folding or straight retracting, was a complete game-changer. It perfected the turtle's defensive philosophy. Safety was no longer relative. It became absolute. And it was this absolute safety that powerfully reinforced the live slow philosophy even further. An organism that no longer has to worry about a head-on attack does not need to be constantly vigilant. It can afford to spend less energy on stress and fear. It can allow its heart to beat even slower, its metabolism to drop to an even more minimal level. The evolution of neck retraction was not just a mechanical change. It was a psychological one, a liberation from the constant fear that governs the animal world. It was the very foundation, the prerequisite, that allowed longevity to evolve. You cannot evolve to live for 200 years if you are likely to be eaten in your 20th. By solving the problem of safety so completely, by creating an impenetrable personal bunker, the turtle created a perfect internal environment, a safe laboratory where evolution could begin to experiment with the very limits of aging itself. The first revolution was building the walls. The second revolution was inventing the gate and the lock. Now that the fortress was sealed, the real work on the inside could begin. The revolution was successful. The invention of the neck retraction mechanism, in one way or another, had sealed the fortress. But all revolutions have profound consequences, and this one was no exception. It did not merely create a new feature. It created a fork in the road, a fundamental diversification that would shape the entire subsequent evolutionary history of turtles. From a single common ancestral lineage, two separate paths now diverged, two different defensive philosophies, two destinies etched in bone. This is the story of the great schism in the turtle world, the birth of the two suborders, Pleurodira and Cryptodira. Let us follow the first path together, the path of the Pleurodira, the side-necked turtles. They are the embodiment of an elegant solution, an ancient dance of flexion. Their evolutionary path prioritized the flexibility of the cervical spine, transforming it into a structure that could fold smoothly to the side. This solution had clear advantages. It required a less extreme redesign of the muscle and bone systems at the base of the neck. It was an effective way to quickly get the head out of the danger zone, but as we have seen, it came at a price. The protection was incomplete. One side of the neck remained exposed, a potential weak point that a sufficiently clever predator could exploit. This imperfection perhaps shaped their evolutionary path. Instead of conquering every environment, the Pleurodira seem to have specialized for places where their solution worked best. They became masters of the freshwater world. Today, their descendants, the river turtles and marsh turtles of Australia, South America, and Africa, are living testaments to this heritage. Many of them have flatter shells, a hydrodynamic feature that helps them swim more efficiently in rivers and lakes. They are the keepers of an ancient tradition, an ingenious but somewhat conservative solution, a proof that perfection is not always a prerequisite for long-term survival. And then there is the second path, the path of the Cryptodira, the hidden-necked turtles. This path required a greater evolutionary gamble. In order to pull the neck straight back, through a shoulder girdle, they had to undergo an even more profound bodily redesign. Their cervical spine became a complex mechanism, like a Swiss watch, with joints and muscle systems working in perfect concert to collapse and extend. It was a radical solution, more energy demanding and requiring greater specialization. But the reward for this gamble was priceless: absolute security. Once the head was withdrawn and the front gate was closed, the Cryptodira turtle became a nearly impenetrable bunker. And it was this perfection that opened the door to an unparalleled evolutionary explosion. With an ultimate defense system, the Cryptodira were freed from the constraints of a specific environment. They were no longer tied to safe freshwater habitats. They were equipped to face any enemy, anywhere. And they did exactly that. They poured out of their evolutionary cradle and conquered the planet. The descendants of the Cryptodira today make up the vast majority of turtle diversity in the world. Look at their achievements. One branch evolved into the giant tortoises, gentle giants grazing on continents and islands, with high-domed shells like mobile hills. Another branch returned to the ocean, transforming their legs into powerful flippers and their shells into hydrodynamic structures, becoming the great sea turtles that travel the world's oceans. Yet, another branch became the box turtles, with a hinged plastron that allows them to completely seal both the front and back entrances, creating a true bony box. Still, other branches became formidable freshwater predators, like the alligator snapping turtles with their powerful jaws. This diversification is the direct consequence of the neck retraction revolution. Two different solutions led to two different evolutionary outcomes. The Pleurodira, with their good enough solution, found success in specializing for a particular lifestyle. They are the specialists. The Cryptodira, with their perfect solution, gained a universal passport, allowing them to become the generalists, the conquerors who could adapt to nearly every habitat on Earth. The schism was complete. The turtle world was no longer a monolith. It had been divided into two dynasties, two lineages, each carrying a different answer to the same question of existence. A decision made in the deep past, a change in the way vertebrae folded, had created two entirely different destinies, two stories that would continue to be written for the next 100 million years. And it was this very diversification, the emergence of two solutions to the same problem, that laid the final foundation for all subsequent complexity. The neck retraction revolution was not merely a defensive upgrade, it was an act of liberation. By sealing the fortress and almost completely neutralizing the threat from predators, it did something even more important. It fundamentally changed the nature of the selective pressures acting upon turtles. Before this revolution, the pressure was still twofold. Turtles had to deal with external enemies while also combating internal decay. But now, the external enemy was all but nullified. The war was no longer fought on two fronts. Now, evolution could focus its entire arsenal of resources on resolving the remaining conflict, the internal war against the decay of time itself. Think of it as the body's energy economy. For most animals, a large portion of their daily energy budget must be allocated to defense and vigilance. Energy is burned on stress, on producing hormones like adrenaline to prepare for split-second escapes, on maintaining a nervous system in a constant state of high alert, and on keeping muscles primed for action. This is a huge and continuous expense, a tax that fear imposes upon life. But the cryptodire turtle, with its ability to completely seal itself off, was largely exempt from this tax. When danger approached, it did not need to prepare to fight or flee. It simply had to retreat into absolute safety. This act, while requiring some muscle energy, saved an enormous amount of energy that would have otherwise been wasted on panic and physiological stress. So, where did that surplus energy go? It was reinvested. Instead of being spent on external defense activities, the energy budget could now be redirected towards strengthening the internal infrastructure. It is like the difference between a nation at war and a nation at peace. A nation at war must pour all its resources into its military and weaponry, but a nation at peace can invest in healthcare, education, science, and the arts, the things that build a resilient and prosperous society from within. The turtle, after its revolution, had entered a state of perpetual biological peace. This reinvested energy allowed evolution to begin long-term projects. It could have invested in building more efficient DNA repair systems, more meticulous work crews for patching up errors in the genome. It could have invested in creating more powerful antioxidant systems, better air purifiers, to clean up the toxic free radicals produced by metabolism. And most importantly, it created the perfect environment that allowed the entire biological machine to operate more slowly. Slowness was no longer a liability. On the contrary, it became an advantage. In the safety of the shell, the heart could afford to beat more leisurely, digestion could take days, and metabolism could drop to a bare minimum, just enough to sustain life. The internal furnace could now smolder instead of roaring, producing less soot and causing the machine to wear out much, much more slowly. The absolute safety of the shell became the foundation, the prerequisite that allowed a slow metabolism to evolve safely. And a slow metabolism, in turn, is the very foundation of longevity. They are two sides of the same coin, bound together by the logic of evolution. You cannot have one without the other. It was this solid foundation, a perfectly protected body, operating on an energy budget, optimized for sustainability instead of speed, that turned the turtle into an ideal biological laboratory. Inside that sealed fortress, shielded from the chaos of the outside world, evolution could now begin to run its longest-term experiments. Experiments on the very nature of aging itself. It could fine-tune genetic pathways, experiment with new proteins, and slowly, over millions of years, sculpt a creature that did not just survive, but that could extend that survival to limits few could imagine. The foundation for complexity, therefore, lies not in a single gene or a single trait. It lies in liberation. Liberation from fear. Liberation from the pressure of haste. By building a peaceful world of its own, the turtle created the necessary space and time for evolution to begin its true work, not just to create life, but to perfect the art of sustaining it. The fortress was sealed. Within it, a state of perpetual biological peace had been established, creating the perfect laboratory for the evolution of slowness. But outside the fortress, the world did not stand still. It continued its cycle of creation and destruction, and one of the greatest destructive events was about to unfold, a final test that would prove the superiority of the turtle's philosophy. Let us move forward together in our time machine to the mark of 66 million years ago. The Cretaceous period is in its final stage. The dynasty of the dinosaurs is at the height of its power. A Tyrannosaurus rex is on the hunt, its every footstep shaking the ground. Herds of Triceratops are on the move, their head frills a formidable defensive wall. In the skies, giant pterosaurs are soaring. This is a world of titans, a complex and balanced ecosystem built over tens of millions of years. And amidst it all, turtles continue their quiet existence, nibbling on leaves, swimming in rivers, largely unnoticed by the main actors on the stage. They are the supporting characters in a grand play. But then, that play came to an abrupt and catastrophic end. From the depths of space, an uninvited guest arrived. A rock the size of a mountain, hurtling towards Earth at an unimaginable speed. Imagine that moment. The sky is torn apart by a streak of light brighter than the Sunday. And then, the impact. An energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs is released in an instant. A thermal blast and shockwave sweeps across the continents at supersonic speeds, incinerating everything in its path. Dust and debris are blasted into the stratosphere, enveloping the entire planet in a thick cloud, blocking out the sunlight. The world plunges into darkness and cold. Photosynthesis stops. Plants die. And with them, the entire food chain collapses. The giant herbivorous dinosaurs have nothing left to eat. And the giant carnivorous dinosaurs, in turn, have nothing left to hunt. The greatest dynasty in the history of life crumbled in a matter of months or years. This was the Great Filter, the most ruthless survival test. And who passed through it? Not the biggest, the strongest, or the fastest. The very traits that were once the formula for success now became a deadly liability. A large body requires a huge amount of food. A fast metabolism requires a constant supply of energy. In a dead and starving world, these were death sentences. And here, in this moment, the turtle's philosophy shone its brightest. Imagine a turtle in that post-apocalyptic world. As the sky darkens and the cold sets in, it does what it has always done best. It retreats. It finds a burrow, or simply digs a deep hole in the ground, and withdraws completely into its fortress. And then, it waits. Its biological machine, fine-tuned for economy, begins to slow down even further. Its heart rate might drop to just a few beats per minute. It enters a deep state of hibernation, a state of suspended animation, almost like death. It doesn't need sunlight. It doesn't need food. Its metabolic furnace is turned down to the lowest possible setting, just enough to keep the flame of life flickering. While the dinosaurs were starving on the desolate surface, the turtle was sleeping a long sleep in the safety of the earth. It could wait for months, perhaps even years, until the first rays of sun pierced through the dust cloud, and the first green shoots began to sprout again. Its generalist diet was also a decisive advantage. When it emerged, it didn't need to find specific plants. It could eat roots, fungi, insects, the carcasses of less fortunate creatures. It was an opportunist, a scavenger in a ruined world. Along with the small, burrowing and omnivorous mammals, turtles were among the great survivors of the KPG catastrophe. This extinction event became the ultimate validation of their evolutionary strategy. Slowness, passive defense, a frugal metabolism traits that seemed like weaknesses in a normal world became superpowers in a world in crisis. And when the dust settled, a completely new world opened up before them. The age of mammals had begun, but in the first few million years of this new era, the Paleocene, the world was still relatively empty. The stage had been cleared. All the main actors, the giant rulers, were gone. Ecological niches across the planet were vacant, like empty houses waiting for new tenants. This was the golden opportunity for the survivors. There were no more giant carnivorous dinosaurs stalking the forests, no more ferocious mosasaurs ruling the oceans. Predation pressure had been drastically reduced, and in this safe and opportunity-rich environment, the evolution of the turtle was unleashed. Like a spring that had been compressed for tens of millions of years under the weight of the dinosaur dynasty, it now sprang forth. The Cryptodira lineage, with its perfect defense system, led this explosion. They began a process known as adaptive radiation, spreading out from their refuges and diversifying to fill new roles in the regenerating ecosystems. This was the factor that drove their golden age. The combination of a proven, incredibly durable body plan and the sudden appearance of an empty world created a perfect storm for evolution. Now, they were not merely surviving. They could begin to experiment. They could evolve to become larger, more specialized, and to conquer environments they had never dared to dream of before. The foundation that was built through sacrifice and quiet revolutions was now ready to have a great edifice built upon it, in a myriad of wondrous shapes and sizes. And the greatest artist of all, evolution, began its work. With a nearly blank global canvas and a medium that had been tempered for 100 million years, the turtle body planet began to sculpt new forms, each one a masterpiece of adaptation, a unique answer to the question, with absolute safety, what can you become? Let us together admire some of the most remarkable works that were born during this golden age. First, let us turn our eyes to the ocean. While many turtle lineages remained faithful to land and fresh water, one branch of the Cryptodira heard the call of the open sea, beginning a great journey of return. This was not an easy homecoming. The ocean is a completely different environment, demanding a completely new set of skills, and evolution responded spectacularly. Observe the transformation. The 4 sturdy legs, designed for walking on land, gradually flattened, elongated, and turned into powerful, muscular flippers. The high-domed shell, perfect for defending against bites from above, was now a hindrance in the water. So, it was compressed, stretched out, becoming a giant teardrop shape, a nearly perfect hydrodynamic design that allowed them to glide through the water with astonishing grace. They sacrificed some of the impregnability of the shell. They could no longer fully retract their head and limbs in exchange for aquatic efficiency. And so, the sea turtles were born. They are the ancient mariners, the tireless travelers of the oceans. They can dive hundreds of meters deep, hold their breath for hours, and travel thousands of kilometers on their great migrations, guided by a magnetic compass within their brains. They are the embodiment of freedom born from safety, a testament to just how versatile the basic turtle design is. They were no longer static fortresses, but biological submarines, soaring through the deep blue silence of the sea. Now, let us return to the land, specifically to the most unique evolutionary laboratories, isolated islands. On these land masses, where large terrestrial predators could not reach, another experiment took place. Freed from the pressure to run or hide, another evolutionary rule came into play, the rule of island gigantism. And no creature exemplifies this rule more majestically than the giant tortoises. Imagine them, living mountains, moving at a pace that seems even slower than the drift of the continents. Some individuals can weigh over 400 kilograms and live through multiple human generations. Their shells are no longer just shields. They have become massive architectural structures thick and heavy domes, a statement of immovable presence. They are ecosystem engineers. By moving, grazing, and creating paths through the vegetation, they have shaped the entire landscapes of the islands they inhabit. They are the ultimate expression of the turtle philosophy. Slowness is no longer a strategy. It has become the very essence of existence. Each of their steps is a geological pulse, each breath an affirmation of permanence. But not all turtles followed the path of passive and gentle defense. Evolution, in its infinite creativity, found a way to turn the fortress itself into a weapon. Let us travel to the dark rivers and swamps of North America, and you will meet a different philosophy. You will meet the alligator snapping turtles. These are the ultimate ambush predators. They do not chase their prey. They let the prey come to them. With their rugged, algae-covered shells, they look no different from a rock or a submerged log. They can lie motionless for hours, completely camouflaged in their environment. And then, they use one of the most ingenious lures in the natural world. Inside their dark mouths, the tip of their tongue has a pink, worm-like appendage, which they wiggle enticingly. A curious fish swims in for an easy meal, and in a split second, the trap springs shut. Their jaws, toothless but lined with a razor-sharp horny beak, can deliver one of the most powerful bites in the reptile world, strong enough to sever bone. This is patience weaponized, slowness turned into a lethal hunting strategy. The alligator snapping turtle is a reminder that beneath the calm exterior, the legacy of an aggressive diapsid ancestor still remains. Finally, there are those who took defense to a level of almost abstract perfection. These are the box turtles. They are not as large as the giant tortoises, nor as fearsome as the snapping turtles. But they have a unique invention, a hinged plastron. This hinge, running horizontally across the middle of the lower shell, allows them to pull both the front and back sections of the plastron upwards, completely sealing the openings of the shell. When a box turtle closes up, it is not just a fortress, it is a hermetically sealed vault. There are no gaps. It is the most perfect realization of the concept of absolute safety. It is a living jewelry box, with the precious life within kept perfectly secure inside. Sea turtles, giant tortoises, alligator snapping turtles, box turtles. 4 forms, 4 stories, 4 masterpieces, and these are just a few examples among the hundreds of species that evolved during this golden age. Each form was a different answer to the same question, but they all stemmed from the same fundamental truth. The safety afforded by the shell and neck retraction liberated them from the normal rules of evolution. It gave them the time and space to experiment, to refine, to become whatever the environment would allow. The golden age of turtles was not an age of dominance through power, but an age of peaceful diversification. A symphony of forms played against the background music of safety. But this golden age did not unfold in a static world. While the turtles were quietly diversifying, filling the vacant ecological niches, another revolution, a louder and more dynamic one, was happening in parallel. From their subterranean shelters, where they had survived the nuclear winter, a new class of animals rose to inherit the world. It was the age of mammals. Initially, they were small, nocturnal creatures, resembling shrews, always hiding in the shadows of the dinosaurs. But now, with the giants gone, they exploded. They grew larger, smarter, and most importantly, they were warm. Their warm blood, maintained by a fast metabolism, allowed them to be active day and night in all climates. They evolved fur for insulation, specialized teeth to eat everything from leaves to meat, and an increasingly complex brain that allowed them to learn, adapt, and form intricate social bonds. This was the rise of a completely different survival philosophy, the philosophy of flexibility, intelligence, and metabolic speed. And so, the stage of life was set for a 66 million year cohabitation, a complex interaction between the two great legacies of the survivors, the turtles and the mammals. This was not always a direct confrontation. For the most part, it was a coexistence, a partitioning of the world. Turtles, with their passive defense and slow metabolism, occupied the niche of low-energy existence. They were the masters of patience, the grazers, the scavengers, the ambush predators. They did not need to move much, nor eat constantly. They were simply part of the landscape, like rocks or logs. Meanwhile, mammals, with their ever-burning metabolic furnaces, took over the niche of high-energy existence. They were the runners, the chasers, the climbers, the thinkers. Their lives were a relentless search for energy to fuel their large brains and warm bodies. They were the engines of change, while turtles were the symbols of stability. But this coexistence was not always peaceful. As mammalian predators grew larger and more intelligent, the turtle fortress once again faced new challenges. The creodonts of the Paleocene, or later the true carnivorans like dogs and cats, evolved powerful jaws and problem-solving skills. An adult turtle might still be a difficult challenge, but the eggs and the hatchlings were a different story. The competition was now not just about who eats whom, but also about who eats whose eggs. Turtles had to evolve more complex nesting strategies, digging deeper holes, or laying vast numbers of eggs in the hope that a few would survive. And sometimes, mammalian intelligence found a way to breach even the strongest fortresses. Some species of otters learned to flip a turtle over and attack the plastron near the leg openings, where it is slightly thinner. Some jaguars in South America are known to be able to use their incredible jaw strength to bite through smaller shells. But these were the exceptions, rather than the rule. For most mammalian predators, an adult turtle remained a meal, not worth the risk of a broken tooth. The more interesting interaction was perhaps the indirect competition. Both tortoises and large grazing mammals, like the later horses and cattle, competed for the same resource, grass and shrubs. But they did so in completely different ways. Mammals, with their fast metabolisms, had to eat vast quantities every day. They moved in herds, clearing an area before moving on. They were efficient, but short-term exploiters. Tortoises, on the other hand, with their slow metabolisms, could survive on much poorer vegetation. They grazed slowly, never staying in one place for too long, allowing the plants time to recover. They were sustainable gardeners. This interaction shows two completely different economic strategies within the same ecosystem. One was a fast-growth economy based on mass consumption. The other was a sustainable economy based on thrift and efficiency. And for most of Earth's history, both strategies found the space to coexist and thrive. Turtles did not need to compete directly with mammals, because they were playing a completely different game. They were not participating in the race for dominance. They were simply continuing the strategy that had kept them alive for hundreds of millions of years. Slow, steady, and extremely difficult to remove. They were the guardians of an ancient heritage in a world increasingly dominated by dynamic and noisy newcomers. They were a constant reminder that there is more than one way to succeed in the game of evolution, and that quiet stability is sometimes the most powerful form of resilience. The world after the great dinosaur extinction was a world of coexistence, a complex balance between the fast-paced philosophy of mammals and the slow-paced philosophy of turtles. On the vast continents, these two forces found a way to share space, each occupying its own role in the web of life. But evolution is never satisfied with balance. It always seeks new opportunities, new lands for experimentation, and sometimes those opportunities arise from a fortunate accident, an unplanned journey. Imagine a tortoise from the Eocene epoch, perhaps swept out to sea by a storm, clinging to a floating mat of vegetation. It cannot swim as well as its sea turtle cousins, but it can survive. Its slow metabolism allows it to drift for weeks, even months, on the open ocean, surviving on drops of dew and bits of plant matter on its makeshift raft. Most such journeys end in tragedy, but occasionally, just occasionally, that raft washes ashore on new land, a volcanic island freshly risen from the seabed, an isolated world, untouched by the footsteps of any four-legged animal. For that surviving tortoise, this was paradise, a world without mammalian predators, a world without competition from large grazing herds, a world of absolute peace. And in these isolated evolutionary laboratories, on islands like the Galapagos, the Seychelles, and Aldabra, one of nature's most magical phenomena took place, the rule of island gigantism, when the external pressures, the pressure to flee, to hide, to compete, are removed. The constraints on size are also relaxed. Abundant food and a lack of enemies allowed evolution to proceed in a single direction, larger. And the turtle lineage seized this opportunity with all its inherent slowness. Over millions of years, they evolved into true giants, dynasties of gentle kings who ruled their islands not by force, but by their very presence. Let us visit one of these kingdoms together. Let us travel to the Aldabra Atoll in the Indian Ocean, home to the world's largest population of giant tortoises. When you set foot there, you feel as if you have stepped back into a lost age. The air is still, broken only by the sound of the wind and the waves. And then you see them, not one, not two, but thousands of small, dark grey moving hills. They are living mountains. Each step they take seems to shake the ground, a geological rhythm expressed through biology. A fully grown male can weigh over 250 kilograms. Its shell, a thick, bony dome, polished by decades of rubbing against vegetation. Its long, wrinkled neck extends from within, and its eyes, ancient and wise, view the world with a seemingly infinite calm. These are creatures that have lived for a century, perhaps even two. The oldest tortoise you see might have been born before your own grandparents. It has seen the rainy and dry seasons come and go, has felt the sun of tens of thousands of days. They are not merely inhabitants of the island. They are the island. They are the architects, the ecosystem engineers who have sculpted the very land they live on. Observe the distinct paths cutting through the dense scrubland. These are not man-made trails. These are tortoise highways, formed over generations by thousands of heavy shells moving back and forth, compacting the soil and clearing the vegetation. These paths determine the flow of water when it rains and create corridors for smaller animals to move through. Look at the areas of low, dense grass, resembling carefully manicured lawns. These are tortoise turfs. By grazing systematically, they prevent larger trees from growing, creating entirely new habitats for other types of plants and insects. They are also the great seed dispersers. As they eat fruits, they carry the seeds across the island and deposit them in a new location along with a dose of natural fertilizer, helping plants to spread and maintain genetic diversity. Their dominance is not that of a tyrant. It is the dominance of a gardener, a steward. They do not rule by fear, but by the slow, persistent rhythm of their existence. Life on these islands operates on tortoise time. Everything happens slowly, shaped by the presence of these gentle giants. They are the center of the web of life, the bedrock upon which the entire ecosystem is built. The kingdom of the giant tortoises is the pinnacle of the passive defense philosophy. When all external threats were removed, they showed the true potential of their body plan, a machine built not just to survive, but to accumulate time, to become part of the landscape itself, a living monument to the power of patience. And so, in those isolated paradises, time seemed to have stopped, or rather, it had merged with the rhythm of the turtle, a slow, persistent, and almost endless flow. These kingdoms were successful experiments, biological utopias built on a foundation of safety and the absence of fear. Try to imagine that again. a creature with no concept of a predator. Fear, the fundamental drive that has shaped the behavior of nearly every animal on the planet, had been erased from their genome over millions of years of peaceful evolution. They did not flee at the sight of a passing shadow. They did not startle at a strange noise. They approached the world with a calm curiosity, a complete openness, because in the entire history of their lineage on these islands, nothing had ever given them a reason to be afraid. This evolutionary innocence, this absence of fear, was the highest expression of their success. But it was also their Achilles' heel, their most fatal flaw, waiting for a new kind of predator, a kind that evolution could never have anticipated. And then they arrived. At first, they were just small, distant specks on the ocean's horizon, strange shapes that no turtle had ever seen, sails billowing in the wind, tall wooden ships, approaching with a speed and a purpose completely alien to the rhythm of the island. This was the arrival of man. Imagine the first encounter. Sailors, weary and hungry after months at sea, setting foot on a land they considered pristine. And then they saw them. Giant creatures, moving slowly, showing no fear. To the turtles, this was likely just a curiosity, a new animal, with no fangs, no claws, seemingly weak. They might have approached the newcomers, craning their long necks to observe, completely unaware that they were looking into the face of their own apocalypse. To the sailors, this was a miracle, not a wonder of nature, but a mobile pantry, an abundant and easily harvestable source of fresh meat that, most importantly, offered no resistance. And in that moment, the shell, the fortress that had protected the turtle lineage for hundreds of millions of years, betrayed them in the most cruel way imaginable. The entire philosophy of defense collapsed before a completely new kind of logic, the logic of resource exploitation. See how the fortress became a prison. Their slowness, once an expression of confidence in a safe world, now made them the easiest of targets. You did not have to hunt a giant tortoise. You simply had to walk up to it. The sheer size and weight of the shell, meant to deter the strongest jaws, now anchored them to the ground, turning them into prisoners of their own bodies. They could not escape. But the true tragedy lay in their greatest strength, their biological resilience, their ability to survive the harshest conditions. The sailors and whalers quickly discovered a horrifying truth. You could flip a giant tortoise onto its back, and it would lie there, helpless. You could carry them onto ships, by the dozens, even hundreds, and stack them in the dark, stifling holds, and they would not die. Their extraordinarily slow metabolism, the machine fine-tuned to prolong life, now prolonged their suffering. They could live for months without food or water. They had become living canned meat, a perfect source of fresh provisions for long sea voyages. Every ship that left the Galapagos or the Seychelles carried with it a lingering death sentence for dozens of these ancient creatures. The shell, the mobile home, had now become a mobile prison cell, a waiting coffin. The scale of the slaughter was unimaginable. This was not hunting for survival. This was an industrial harvest. The logbooks of whaling ships from the 18th and 19th centuries record the cold numbers. Took 14 tortoises today. Loaded 300 tortoises this week. It is estimated that in the 19th century alone, over 200,000 giant tortoises were taken from the Galapagos Islands. The islands that were once kingdoms of silence and endurance now echoed with the shouts of men and the sound of heavy shells being dragged across the rocks. The tortoise highways now led to killing beaches, where they were butchered en masse. The empty shells were left behind, bleaching in the sun like the tombstones of a civilization that had been wiped out. Species began to disappear. The Pinta Island tortoise, the Floriana Island tortoise, many species from the Mascarene Islands like Rodrigues and Reunion, all were hunted to extinction. Each extinction was a genetic library burned to the ground. a story millions of years long brought to an abrupt and brutal end. But the destruction did not only come from direct hunting. Humans brought with them their own invading armies, creatures that shattered the fragile balance of these isolated ecosystems. Black rats that stowed away on ships swarmed the islands, becoming perfect predators of the eggs and hatchlings, creatures not yet large enough to defend themselves. Feral pigs, goats, and cattle were released and became competitive grazing machines. They ate faster, reproduced faster, and devastated the vegetation far more rapidly than the slow-moving tortoises. They destroyed the very food source and nesting grounds of the native giants. It was a war on multiple fronts, a biological invasion that the turtles were completely unequipped to handle. Their paradise was invaded, poisoned, and destroyed from its very roots. The encounter between humans and giant tortoises is one of the greatest ecological tragedies of modern history. It was a collision of two timelines, two opposing philosophies of existence. On one side was tortoise time, slow, sustainable, accumulated over epochs. On the other side was human time, fast, extractive, measured in the profits of a sea voyage. And in that collision, slowness lost. The fortress built to withstand the bites of reptiles and the paws of mammals fell easily to a completely new kind of pressure, organized intelligence and insatiable greed, the very traits that made the tortoise a masterpiece of survival. Its slowness, its resilience, its solid shell became the primary reasons for its downfall. In a world shaped by humans, the fortress had become a liability, and innocence had become a death sentence. The kingdoms of the giants had fallen. The fall was swift and devastating. In the span of a few short centuries, an evolutionary masterpiece sculpted over millions of years was nearly wiped from existence. The kingdoms had turned into graveyards. The silence on the islands was no longer the silence of peace, but the silence of absence. It seemed all too late. But then, a slow change began to take place, not in the natural world, but in the mind of the destroyer itself. In the 20th century, a new awareness began to dawn in the human conscience. We started to recognize the devastation we had caused. The tales of relentless exploitation were gradually replaced by calls for conservation. We began to look at the empty shells, not as trophies, but as evidence of our own ignorance and cruelty. And so, a new era rose from the ashes, the age of conservation. It is a race against time, a desperate attempt to save what remains of the lost kingdoms. The islands that were once pantries were now declared national parks, strictly protected reserves. The invading armies of goats and pigs began to be systematically eradicated, a difficult and costly process lasting decades, in an attempt to restore the pristine vegetation. Captive breeding programs were established, arranged marriages between the remaining individuals in the fragile hope that lineages on the brink could be pulled back. The war was no longer between the turtle and the predator, but between despair and hope. And in this war, a few individual turtles became immortal symbols, the last ambassadors for an entire lost world. No story is more tragic and iconic than the story of Lonesome George. Imagine him, the last Pinta Island tortoise on Earth. He was found in 1971, a lone survivor on an island where his species was thought to have been extinct for decades. He was a living echo from the past, a walking fossil. He was brought to the Charles Darwin Research Station in the Galapagos, where he became the most potent symbol of extinction. For 40 years, scientists worked tirelessly to find him a mate, pairing him with females from the most closely related giant tortoise species, hoping that some part of his unique genome could be passed on. But all efforts failed. George lived out his final years in a solitude befitting his name, carrying the weight of an entire lineage on his back. When he died in 2012, an evolutionary door closed forever. His death was not a natural event. It was a human-induced conclusion, a final period at the end of a story, millions of years long. He is a painful reminder that extinction is forever. But amidst the tragedies, there are also stories of resilience and hope. Let us travel to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. There, on the grounds of the governor's residence, a creature still quietly walks, a creature believed to be the oldest living terrestrial animal on Earth. His name is Jonathan. Jonathan is a Seychelles giant tortoise, believed to have been born around 1832. Pause to reflect on that. He hatched from his egg before the invention of photography. He has lived through nearly 40 US presidents. He was already a mature adult when Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species. He has witnessed the entire modern history of humanity unfold. The industrial revolutions, 2 world wars, the dawn of the space age, and the digital age. Through all that turmoil, his life has remained unchanged, eating, sleeping, and walking in his garden. Jonathan is not just a tortoise. He is a living time machine. His body, though now old, blind, and lacking a sense of smell, is a testament to the incredible resilience of the turtle's biological machine. He is a thread connecting us to a bygone world, a world of the 19th century, a world of sailing ships and empires. His existence is a gift, a rare opportunity for us to behold a creature that has accumulated nearly 2 centuries of time in its body. This new era is one of extremes. On one hand, we have extraordinary conservation efforts, successes in restoring tortoise populations on some islands, and the existence of icons like Jonathan. On the other hand, we have the ghost of extinction still looming, with sad stories like that of Lonesome George and many other turtle species around the world still threatened by humans. The story of the giant tortoise kingdoms has shifted from an evolutionary epic to a moral fable. It forces us to confront a difficult question. What is our role on this planet? Are we stewards or destroyers? Do we have the right to decide the fate of lineages that have existed for hundreds of millions of years longer than we have? The remaining giant tortoises are not just biological marvels. They are living legacies, the last survivors of a lost age. And now, their fate rests entirely in the hands of the hurried and unpredictable primate that once nearly wiped them out. We have journeyed through geological epochs, witnessed the birth of a living fortress, its perfection through biological revolutions, and the rise and fall of giant kingdoms. The entire story thus far has been an epic of evolution on a macro scale, a story told by fossils and extinction events. But all of that, from the solid shell to the absolute safety, were merely the external conditions. They were the stage, the protected environment, the solid foundation. The real work, the true miracle of longevity, takes place on a completely different scale, an invisible and silent one. Now, we will begin our journey into that machine itself. We will trace the process that led to the ultimate complexity of the internal system, an evolution aimed not at creating larger or stronger structures, but at refining and perfecting the art of sustaining life at the cellular level. This is an evolution not recorded in stone, but written in the language of genes and proteins. Let us return to the starting point of the turtle's philosophy. Slowing down. We have seen that the safety of the shell allowed a slow metabolism to evolve. But this was not a one-way relationship. It was a positive feedback loop, a co-evolutionary dance that lasted for millions of years. As the metabolism began to slow, it further reinforced the defensive lifestyle. A creature that doesn't need much energy, doesn't need to move much to find food. It can spend more time resting, digesting, existing in a state of stillness. The external slowness and the internal slowness nurtured each other, pushing one another to new limits. This process created a completely new selective pressure, one that no longer prioritized muscle power or reaction speed, but rather the efficiency and durability of the cellular infrastructure. Imagine two cars. One is a Formula One racing car, built for maximum speed over a short period. Its engine roars, burning a huge amount of fuel, and every part is pushed to its breaking point. It might win the race, but after a few hundred kilometers, it needs a complete overhaul. The second car is a long-haul truck, built to run for millions of kilometers. Its engine operates at a steady, efficient speed, designed to minimize wear and tear. Every component, from the tires to the oil filtration system, is optimized for endurance. Most life on Earth evolved according to the model of the racing car. The turtle, on the other hand, bet everything on becoming the ultimate truck. And to build such a biological truck, evolution had to work on every single component. It had to fine-tune the engine itself. The mitochondria, the power plants of the cell, in turtles seem to be optimized to burn fuel more cleanly. They have special mechanisms to minimize the leakage of electrons in the electron transport chain, the main process that generates energy. Less leakage means fewer free radicals are produced, the toxic sparks that can damage other parts of the cell. The engine not only runs slower, but it also runs more efficiently. Next, evolution had to upgrade the maintenance system. The bodies of all organisms have cellular repair crews, but in turtles, these crews seem to work harder and more effectively. Their DNA repair enzymes are extremely sensitive, capable of detecting and patching up even the smallest lesions in the genome with astonishing accuracy. Their antioxidant systems, like the enzymes superoxide dismutase and catalase, operate at a high level, constantly mopping up free radicals before they can cause serious damage. It's like a truck that not only has a durable engine, but also has a team of skilled mechanics working full-time right inside it. And finally, evolution had to build a nearly impenetrable security system. This is the anti-cancer defense system. As we know, the larger and longer-lived an organism is, the higher the risk that one of its cells will mutate and become cancerous. This is a simple statistical rule, but turtles seem to have broken this rule. They are a prime example of Petau's paradox. They have trillions of cells and live for centuries, yet their cancer rates are astonishingly low. The answer lies in an extremely strict system of cellular surveillance. Turtle cells appear to have a very low tolerance for genetic damage. If a cell accumulates even a few dangerous mutations, instead of trying to repair itself and carry on, it receives a powerful signal to activate the process of self-destruction or apoptosis. It's like a security system that would rather eliminate a few innocent civilians than let a single terrorist enter the city. This hypersensitivity nips cancerous rebellions in the bud. This entire process, an efficient engine, a superior maintenance system, and an uncompromising security system, was not the result of a single mutation. It was the result of a fine-tuning process that spanned millions of years, an accumulation of thousands of small changes in the genome, all guided by a single principle: the prioritization of durability over performance. While mammals were evolving larger brains to think faster and longer legs to run faster, turtles were quietly evolving complex biochemical pathways to make their proteins more stable and their cell membranes less prone to oxidation. These were two completely different evolutionary paths, leading to two completely different outcomes. On one side, the complexity of behavior and intelligence. On the other, the complexity of internal maintenance and repair. And the ultimate complexity of the turtle lies in this very anti-aging biological machine, a masterpiece of optimization built on a foundation of safety and fine-tuned by the slow flow of time. And so, the silent evolution completed its work, a work not of stone or bone, but of biochemical pathways and genetic networks. It created a masterpiece of endurance. But what is the nature of this masterpiece? Where does the real secret lie? The answer is not in a single factor, but in a perfect balance, a synergy between three fundamental principles. We can envision it as a golden triangle of longevity, with each vertex representing a biological strategy refined to near perfection. The first vertex, the foundation of the entire structure, is a slow metabolism. We have spoken of it as a gently smoldering furnace. But let us look more closely at that flame. Metabolism, fundamentally, is the pace of life. It is the rate at which a body converts food into energy. In a hummingbird, this furnace is a blazing forge, burning through nectar at a frantic rate to power thousands of wing beats per minute. In a turtle, it is like an oil lamp, burning steadily, economically, and with almost no smoke. The heart rate of a resting giant tortoise might be just 10 beats per minute, or even fewer. Its breaths are shallow and far apart, each inhalation a deliberate act rather than an unconscious reflex. The entire system is designed to conserve, not to consume. And the direct consequence of this slow burn is a drastic reduction of the greatest internal enemy of aging: oxidative stress. The free radicals, the toxic sparks that fly from the metabolic furnace, are generated in far smaller quantities. This means that the entire cellular infrastructure, from the delicate cell membranes to the complex proteins, is subjected to far less assault. It is like operating a machine at a low speed. The wear and tear occurs much more slowly. This slowness is not laziness. It is a form of extreme efficiency, a proactive strategy to extend the lifespan of the machine itself. That is the first vertex of the triangle. But, no matter how cleanly the furnace burns, a few sparks will always fly. No energy process is 100% perfect. And this is where we come to the second vertex of the triangle, one that is perhaps even more crucial: cellular resilience. If the first vertex is about creating less damage, the second is about being extraordinarily good at repairing that damage. This is the realm of the artisans and the guardians. Let's start with the instruction manual of life, the genome. Every time a turtle cell divides, its team of DNA repair enzymes operates with heightened vigilance. They don't just fix obvious copying errors. They constantly scan the DNA strands for the slightest damage caused by free radicals or environmental factors. They are the most diligent librarians, ensuring that the original book is preserved almost perfectly over many decades. Then there is the problem of the slow-burning fuse, the telomeres. In most animals, this fuse simply burns down, with no way to lengthen it again. But turtles, along with a few other long-lived creatures, possess a secret weapon, an enzyme called telomerase. Imagine telomerase as a specialized repairman whose job is to follow behind the copying machine and add back the bit of telomere tip that was lost. It constantly replenishes the fuse, preventing it from burning out. This allows turtle cells to divide many more times than our cells can, without entering a state of senescence. Their countdown clock runs much more slowly, and sometimes it can even be wound back. And the resilience doesn't stop at the DNA. It extends to the proteins themselves, the machines and tools that do all the work in the cell. Turtle proteins seem to be more structurally stable, less prone to deforming due to heat or chemical stress. Furthermore, they have an extremely effective protein quality control system with chaperone proteins that help other proteins fold into their correct shapes and that quickly eliminate faulty ones before they can cause problems. The entire cellular city of the turtle is built to last, with stronger buildings and a maintenance crew that is always working at full capacity. And now, we arrive at the final, crowning vertex of the triangle, the jewel in the crown of turtle longevity, cancer resistance. This is where conventional logic breaks down. Peto's paradox states that the more cells an organism has, and the longer it lives, the higher the probability that one of those cells will turn cancerous. A giant tortoise, with its trillions of cells and its lifespan of nearly 2 centuries, should be a cancer-generating machine. But the reality is the complete opposite. They are virtually immune to the disease. How? The answer lies in an uncompromising system of internal security. Turtle cells have an extreme sensitivity to danger signals. They possess more copies of key tumor suppressor genes, the crucial guardian soldiers of the genome. These genes act like sensors, constantly monitoring the health of the cell. If a cell suffers serious DNA damage, or begins to show even the slightest signs of abnormal division, these genes do not give it a second chance. They do not attempt a desperate repair. Instead, they immediately trigger the self-destruct program, apoptosis. The rebellious cell receives an undeniable command: sacrifice yourself for the good of the whole organism. This process is so swift and decisive that it snuffs out the embers of cancer before they can even form a tiny tumor. The cellular society of the turtle is one of iron discipline, where the survival of the community is always placed above the survival of any single individual. The 3 vertices of the triangle. A slow metabolism reduces the formation of damage. Cellular resilience repairs most of the damage that does occur, and cancer resistance ruthlessly eliminates any cells that are damaged beyond repair. They are not 3 separate strategies. They are a single, interconnected, and self-reinforcing system, a perfect loop of prevention, repair, and purification. This is the essence of the anti-aging biological machine, a masterpiece of balance that has been fine-tuned by evolution over hundreds of millions of years. And so, the golden triangle is complete. 3 faces of a biological pyramid, each reinforcing and protecting the others, creating a structure of astonishing durability. A slow metabolism lessens the burden on the repair systems. Efficient repair systems reduce the risk of faulty cells, and an uncompromising security system eliminates any faulty cells that slip through. It is a virtuous cycle of resilience, a system designed not to live fast, but to live long. But all these complex mechanisms, working in concert, produce a result, an overall state of being, something even more miraculous than the sum of its parts. Scientists have a term for this state: negligible senescence. This is one of the most fascinating and profound concepts in the entire biology of aging, and the turtle is one of its most perfect emblems. Negligible senescence does not mean immortality. Turtles can still die. They can get sick. They can have accidents. They can starve if their environment changes. Death is still an unavoidable reality, but the difference lies in how they experience time. For most of us, mammals, and many other creatures, aging is a predictable process of decline. Think about a human life. We are born, we grow, we reach our physical and cognitive peak sometime in our 20 seconds or 30 seconds, and then, slowly but surely, the decline begins. Muscle strength decreases, reflexes slow down, the immune system becomes weaker, the body's ability to repair itself becomes less efficient. The risk of age-related diseases, like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, increases exponentially. Our mortality rate is not a constant. It rises dramatically as we get older. A 90-year-old person is at a much, much higher risk of dying in the next year than a 30-year-old. This is senescence in its truest sense, a pre-programmed functional decline, an internal decay that leads to the inevitable collapse of the system. But turtles appear to be playing a completely different game. When we say they experience negligible senescence, it means that this curve of decline is almost flat. Their mortality rate does not increase with age after they have reached maturity. A 100-year-old giant tortoise is not a senior citizen in our sense of the word. It is not weaker, not slower, and not more susceptible to disease than a 30-year-old tortoise. In fact, in some cases, they become stronger and more fertile as they get older. Imagine that, a creature whose prime of life is not a fleeting moment, but a vast plateau that lasts for decades, even centuries. The fertility of a 100-year-old female can be just as robust as when she was young. Its immune system still functions effectively to fight off infections. The strength of its jaws and limbs is maintained. Biologically, it does not get old. It simply continues to be. So why do they die? They die for the same reasons an ancient tree in a forest dies. It does not die of old age. A 1,000-year-old oak tree does not die because its biochemical processes are declining. It dies because a storm strong enough finally topples it, or a prolonged drought desiccates it, or a fungal disease finally finds a way to breach its defenses. It dies from the accumulation of external risks, not from internal collapse. The same is true for turtles. A 150-year-old tortoise may have survived thousands of storms and droughts, but perhaps the 1,001st storm will flip it onto its back, and it will die under the scorching sunday. It may have fought off millions of pathogens during its life, but perhaps a new virus its immune system has never encountered will defeat it. Or, simply, after a century and a half, its luck runs out. It dies from statistics. It dies because over a long enough period, an unlucky event is almost certain to happen. The entire system built by the golden triangle, the slow metabolism, the cellular resilience, and the cancer resistance, has created a biological machine that does not wear out with time. Functional decline, the very thing that haunts our existence, has been all but eliminated from their life equation. This is the ultimate impact of everything we have explored. The shell created a physical fortress. The neck retraction revolution sealed that fortress, and inside that absolute safety, the silent evolution built a biochemical fortress, a body that resists not only external enemies, but also the most relentless enemy of all, the passage of time. Negligible senescence is the pinnacle of the turtle's philosophy, the perfect realization of the live slow strategy. It is a state of being where life is not a candle that burns brightly and then gutters out, but a rock that is infinitesimally slowly eroded by the winds of chance. It turns each individual turtle into a repository of time, a living chronicle of the environment it has experienced, with the scars on its shell telling the story of past droughts, of battles fought, and of seasons of plenty. It is a profound reminder that there are ways of being completely different from our own, ways in which time is not an enemy to be conquered, but an environment to inhabit, an ocean in which to swim slowly and gracefully. The anti-aging biological machine has been decoded, a masterpiece of balance, built on a foundation of safety and refined over hundreds of millions of years. It is a machine created to face the greatest enemy of all, time itself. And in that battle, it has won spectacularly. It has survived the greatest predators. It has endured the most devastating global catastrophes. It seems to be an immortal design, an eternal solution to the problem of survival. But now, as we turn our gaze toward the future, a disturbing question arises. Can a machine built to exist in the world of the past survive in a world of the future? A future no longer shaped by the slow cycles of geology and climate, but by a new force. A force that operates at a speed and scale without precedent. Us. Let us embark on two imaginary journeys into the future. For the first journey, let's imagine a world where humans never existed. In this scenario, the future of the turtle would simply be a continuation of its glorious past. We would see the continents continue to drift, collide, and break apart. In millions of years, a new supercontinent, perhaps Pangaea Ultima, would form again. And on that supercontinent, turtles would still be walking. Perhaps their shells would change slightly to adapt to new forests or new deserts. Perhaps new species would branch off from the current lineages, but the basic design, the philosophy of slowness and defense, would remain because it has proven to be a successful strategy under every natural condition this planet can create. They would continue to be the patient gardeners, the living bedrocks of ecosystems, quietly witnessing the rise and fall of other mammalian species, just as they witnessed the dynasty of the dinosaurs. Their future would be measured in geological eons, a story as long and slow as their very nature. But that is a dream, a future that never was. Now, let us begin the second journey, the journey into the real future, the future we are creating, the Anthropocene. In this new world, the turtles' greatest strengths, the very traits that help them survive every catastrophe, are ironically becoming their most fatal weaknesses. Let us begin with the most invisible, yet all-encompassing threat, climate change. The atmosphere is warming at a rate faster than at any point in the planet's recent history. For a cold-blooded creature like the turtle, this change in temperature brings a particularly subtle and cruel danger, one that strikes at the very foundation of procreation. For many turtle species, the sex of the hatchling is not determined by chromosomes, as it is in humans, but by the temperature of the sand in which the egg is incubated. This process is called temperature-dependent sex determination. In a given nest, eggs in the cooler, deeper parts might hatch as males, while eggs in the warmer, shallower parts will hatch as females. For millions of years, the natural balance of temperatures ensured a roughly balanced sex ratio. But now, as beaches around the world are warming uncontrollably, that balance is being broken. Scientists are observing an alarming phenomenon: nests that produce only females. On some key sea turtle nesting beaches in Australia, over 99% of new hatchlings are female. Imagine that tragedy. A generation of mothers with no fathers, a species walking into a genetic dead end. It is a silent extinction, a disappearance caused not by the snap of a predator's jaws, but by the absence of one half of the population needed to continue the story. At the same time, rising sea levels are slowly swallowing the very nesting beaches they have faithfully returned to for thousands of generations. Their ancient instinct, etched into their genome, is leading them to places that no longer exist. The second threat is more direct: habitat loss. The speed of human development is a force that the turtle's slowness simply cannot cope with. A forest, where a box turtle has lived its entire life, can be raised to build a shopping mall in a matter of weeks. A river, where an alligator-snapping turtle has ambushed prey for decades, can be dammed or polluted beyond viability. Our highways cut across their ancient migratory paths, turning every journey to find a mate or a nesting spot into a deadly game of chance. Their world is shrinking, being fragmented, being besieged by a world of concrete and asphalt that is expanding at a dizzying rate. For a slow-moving creature with a large home range, this is a life sentence of imprisonment on ever-shrinking ecological islands. And then there is a new enemy, an enemy that evolution could never have prepared them for, an enemy born from our own civilization: plastic. Imagine a sea turtle gliding through the ocean, its ancient eyes, designed to recognize the shape of a delicious jellyfish, see a translucent, floating object bobbing in the current. It is a plastic bag, but the turtle's brain, programmed by millions of years of experience with the natural world, cannot tell the difference. Its ancient instinct is betrayed by a modern phantom. It swallows the bag, and that bag will sit in its gut, indigestible, slowly causing a painful death from blockage or starvation. The millions of tons of plastic we dump into the oceans each year have turned their habitat into a minefield. Discarded fishing nets, ghost nets, continue to drift and entangle turtles, drowning them in an invisible and endless trap. All of these threats, climate, habitat, pollution, are byproducts of our civilization. But the final threat comes from the very nature of human greed and ignorance, direct exploitation. Despite international bans, poaching continues. The beautiful shell of the hawksbill turtle is still turned into jewelry. Their meat and eggs are still considered a delicacy in many parts of the world. And then there is the global pet trade, an industry that has kidnapped millions of turtles from their wild homes, condemning them to a life in glass boxes, far from the world they were born to belong to. The turtle's past prepared it to face almost any kind of natural disaster. It taught it how to survive asteroid impacts, ice ages, and volcanic eruptions. But it never taught it how to survive a disaster that thinks, that plans, and that desires. The future of the turtle, therefore, is no longer a question of biology. Their anti-aging machine still works perfectly, but even a perfect machine cannot run if it has no world to live in. Their future has now become a question of morality, a question posed directly to us. Can we slow down our own destruction long enough to allow their slowness to continue to exist? And perhaps that is the greatest tragedy of all. The biological machine built to conquer time is being defeated by space, the shrinking of living space. But let us conduct one final thought experiment. Let us fast forward into a future where the turtles have survived even us. Let's imagine that somehow humanity found a way to live in harmony with the planet, or that we left for the stars, leaving the Earth to its quiet inheritors. In that scenario, have the turtles won? Have they achieved eternity? To answer this question, we must place their incredible lifespan, 100 or 200 years, in the context of larger clocks, the clocks that tick to the rhythm of the planet and of the stars themselves. Let us place a Jonathan the tortoise, with his nearly 2 centuries, next to the lifespan of planet Earth, 4.5 billion years. The entire life of the world's oldest terrestrial animal, in this context, is but the blink of an eye. If the entire history of the Earth were compressed into a single 24-hour day, the entire existence of modern humans would be just the last few seconds before midnight. And Jonathan's life? It would not even be a single tick of that clock. It is an infinitesimally brief moment, a single breath in a long life, but it is a meaningful breath. Now, let us zoom out even further. Let us look at the star that has nurtured all of this life, our Sunday. It is a stable and reliable nuclear furnace, but it too is not eternal. It is in its middle age, about 4.6 billion years old, and it has about another 5 billion years of fuel left in its core. What happens then? The story of a star's death is one of the most tragic epics in the cosmos. As the hydrogen in its core runs out, the sun will begin to burn helium, and this process will cause it to swell violently. It will become a red giant. Imagine that sight from Earth, if anyone is left to witness it. The sun will grow larger and larger in the sky, no longer a brilliant golden orb, but a furious glowing red sphere, consuming space. Mercury and Venus will be completely engulfed. Its surface will swell out to nearly the orbit of Earth. Even if our planet is not swallowed, the intense heat will scorch everything. The oceans will boil violently and evaporate into space. The atmosphere will be stripped away by powerful stellar winds. The Earth will become a dry, molten, sterilized rock, cleansed by the very star that once gave it life. In this scenario, the turtle's fortress, no matter how strong, cannot possibly stand. Its internal anti-aging machine might still be working perfectly, but its home, the planet itself, will be destroyed. This is the unavoidable ultimate fate of all life on Earth, written by the laws of astrophysics. The turtle's story, no matter how long it lasts, has a final chapter dictated by the death of the Sunday, but the universe is larger than our Sunday. Let us go to an even more distant future, a future that the human mind can barely grasp. In about 1 trillion years, the stelliferous era, the brilliant age we are living in, will come to an end. All the stars in the universe will have burned through their fuel and faded away. The giant stars died long ago in supernova explosions. The sun-like stars will have become cold, white dwarfs, and the smallest, most enduring stars, the red dwarfs, will be the last guttering lights in the darkness before they too wink out. The universe will enter the degenerate era. The night sky will be an eternal, perfect black, populated only by the remnants of stars, black dwarfs, neutron stars, and black holes, all quietly drifting in an ever colder and emptier cosmos. On nearly infinite timescales, trillions upon trillions of years, even these structures will decay. The universe will enter the black hole era. Only these gravitational monsters will remain as the last organized structures. But even they are not forever. Due to a quantum effect known as Hawking radiation, black holes will also slowly evaporate, releasing their energy back into the universe, in a process so slow it is almost unimaginable. And then, after a period for which writing down the numbers is meaningless, the last black hole will evaporate. The universe will enter its final state, the dark era, a near-perfect vacuum, cold, dark, where subatomic particles drift aimlessly. All structure, all complexity, all temperature differences will have vanished. Entropy will have won. Absolutely. This is the heat death of the universe, a final state of equilibrium, a perfect and eternal silence. So, in the context of this ultimate cosmic oblivion, what is the meaning of everything we have explored? What is the meaning of the solid shell, of the anti-aging machine, of the 200-year life of a turtle, if it all eventually dissolves into nothingness? This is a profound philosophical question, but perhaps the answer lies in the flaw of the question itself. We are looking for meaning in the destination, in permanence, but perhaps the true meaning lies in the journey itself. Yes, the universe will die, but for a brief and precious period, a few trillion years, it was alive. It created stars, galaxies, and on at least one planet, it created something even more miraculous: organized complexity, life. The rebellion against entropy, though ultimately doomed to fail, is still the grandest and most meaningful event that has ever occurred. And in that rebellion, the turtle is one of the most resilient warriors. Its lifespan is meaningless when compared to the age of the universe, but that is not the point. Its meaning is found in its extraordinary complexity, in the beauty of a biological machine so finely tuned that it could maintain order and resist chaos for longer than almost any other creature. It was never about defeating entropy forever. It was about playing a beautiful, intelligent game against it, in the brief moment that life was granted. The ultimate fate of the turtle, like ours, is to become stardust once more. But its legacy, the lesson it leaves behind, is not found in its permanence, but in its very existence. That in a universe that is mostly empty and chaotic, something as complex, as enduring, and as beautiful as a turtle could exist at all. And that, in itself, is a miracle. And so our great journey, a voyage that has spanned hundreds of millions of years and billions of light years, comes to a close. We began in the vast silence of a nascent universe. We witnessed the birth of a living fortress from the ashes of a lost world. We decoded the most intricate mechanisms of a near-perfect biological machine. And finally, we contemplated the unavoidable fate of all things in the heat death of the cosmos. Now, with all said and seen, only one question, the most important question, remains hanging in this final stillness. What is the meaning of it all? After understanding that even mountains and stars will fade, what then is the meaning of a turtle's 200-year life? And perhaps more importantly, what is the meaning of our own short, hurried lives? Perhaps the answer has been there all along, hidden not in the equations of astrophysics or in the sequences of genes, but in the very contrast between two stories, their story and ours. Let us look back at ourselves, the descendants of the mammalian class, warm-blooded creatures born from the arms race of evolution. Our lives are defined by haste. We are obsessed with time, with doing more, going further, achieving success before our own clocks stop ticking. Our metabolic furnaces burn brightly, not just to keep our bodies warm, but to fuel an ever-anxious brain, a brain that constantly reflects on the past and plans for the future. We are creatures of doing. We build, we destroy, we love, we fight. We live in a symphony of frantic actions and emotions. And so, we look at the turtle, and at first, we might only see lack, a lack of speed, a lack of dynamism, a lack of behavioral complexity. But that is because we are looking through the lens of ourselves. We are mistaken. The turtle is not a flawed version of us. It is a completely different answer to the same question of existence. If we are creatures of doing, then the turtle is a creature of being. Its entire evolutionary masterpiece was not aimed at allowing it to do something more efficiently. It was aimed at a single purpose: to allow it to be, to exist, more durably and more serenely. The shell is not a tool. It is a temple, a sacred space where the chaos of the outside world cannot reach. The slow metabolism is not a limitation. It is a form of biological meditation, a way of experiencing time not as a raging river to be swum against, but as a still lake upon which to float. Negligible senescence is not a superpower for acting forever. It is a liberation from decay itself, allowing its existence to be unburdened by the shadow of its own decline. We have spent millions of years evolving a brain that can contemplate the meaning of the universe. The turtle has spent millions of years evolving a body that can become one with the stillness of the universe. Its true legacy, the lesson it leaves for us, is not in some longevity gene we can copy. It is much more profound than that. It is a philosophical lesson. The turtle teaches us that strength is not always found in aggression. Sometimes it is found in the ability to endure. It teaches us that victory does not always belong to the one who finishes first. Sometimes it belongs to the one who is still walking long after the race is over. And most importantly, it teaches us that there is a deep wisdom in slowness. In a world that spins at a dizzying pace, a world that demands we answer instantly, decide instantly, live instantly, the existence of the turtle is a quiet rebellion. It is an invitation for us to stop, to breathe, and to listen. To listen to the slow beat of our own hearts, to listen to the turning of the seasons, to listen to the growing of a tree. The story of the turtle's longevity, in the end, is not about how long it lives. It is about how it lives. It is about finding peace within a fortress, whether that fortress is a shell of bone or the stillness of our own minds. It is about understanding that meaning is found not at the end of the road, but in each slow, deliberate step upon it. Thank you for traveling with me on this long and slow journey, a journey that I hope has brought you not just knowledge, but a measure of peace. Now, let these thoughts dissolve, like the giant tortoises receding into the darkness of the night. Let your mind become still, and hope that, in your dreams, you will find yourself floating in a gentle ocean of time, no longer hurried, no longer anxious, simply being. I wish you a deep sleep and dreams of the quietness of the stars. Hello, and until we meet again,